fuck does that mean? Okay. So, sorry about that. Welcome, everybody. This is the Cult of Apathy, where we are going to discuss data, technology, AI, and making beautiful art with our evil, evil robots. It's going to be so much fun.
Or we might not. I don't care. Never mind, that joke didn't land.
It's fine.
Because it's like the Cult of Apathy.
I didn't actually hear what you said.
Oh, I said, or we might not. I don't care.
Right. Okay.
See,
No,
it did land.
I was distracted. I just didn't hear you. Right.
Speaking of landing,
Got it.
before we get really into it, I would like to announce that tomorrow I'm leaving on a
Where are you
jet
going?
plane. Going to see my babies.
Awesome.
Yay! So if you don't see me for a while, it's because thank you. So now on to the art.
Awesome. We could talk about whatever. I mean, there's no real structure. We're anarchists here. We don't believe in any of it.
Right.
Fuck rules.
I think that I will you're making art while we talk.
Ooh, I like that
There you go.
idea.
That's what I was doing
It's a
last
good
week.
idea.
That's what I'm always doing while we talk. What do y'all? What?
I would be doing that, but I don't have any internet still.
Yeah, that's what I was doing last week. I was making art with the pictures of the profile pictures of my fallen blocked enemies. It was beautiful.
Speaking of that, I ended up interacting with somebody just on a random post earlier today, and because they were pointing out, they mentioned that their mom had the same car that I was asking about the dash for, and then I checked their profile just to see who they were, and I realized that they have gotten into it with all of my friends. They've gotten into it with you, Lynn. They've gotten into it with Node. They've gotten into it with Chris.
Who is it? Who is it? It's me?
No. Let's see.
It's not Carl Ortiz, is it?
No. It's some random. It's just imagine this, except that this has a 5 at the end. Her name is Lantha.
Yeah.
Lantha.
Oh, by the way, Lynn, why do you have Blair blocked? I keep meaning to ask
Which
you.
Blair?
Blair Silver. The one that's like the satire of Claire. I told them you probably thought it was like a fake Claire account, but it's not. It's like they're a satire of Claire.
I don't think I have Blair blocked. Do I?
Maybe on the older account, because she had Blair Silver, and then they had to switch it to not Blair Silver because they got suspended because someone reported as like a account trying to but.
Okay, so the only reason I would do that, I think, is because Claire made a really big deal about fake accounts a while back.
Yeah, I figured that's what it was because it looks like a fake account, but it's. I don't know if they changed it to say satire or not, but it is not a fake account.
Right on.
It's the Blair Silver and the not Blair Silver, both of them.
Oh boy, that's really something. Okay, no, I would never intentionally block Blair. Because Blair's okay. So. She's okay. I mean, unless, let me check. I'm going to search for her. Blair Silver. No,
I always call it her because it's Blair, but I don't actually think it is a girl. But that's why I try to say they, because I don't think it is a girl, even though it says Blair.
It's okay. It's a parody. The character is female, so technically you're not misgendering them unless they tell you so. So,
well, Blair could
works
be
out.
A unisex name.
True.
That is very true. Yeah. So it
could
is
be
satirizing
like Robin or Lonnie that
female,
way. You know? So yeah.
I guess we'll have to ask Blair.
So would you believe that I met a guy named Lynn the other day?
I would.
I did not know that was a gender neutral name. That just kind of shocked me a little bit.
I've known of a few boy Lyns. It's just not common.
They're usually Chinese and they spell it differently, though.
Is it short for Lindsay?
I've seen a couple of boy Lyns that were Lynn. Just though it's not really coming to my mind who it was, but I know I've seen it somewhere.
I think I've only seen it once.
Far more often a female name, though.
Yeah,
I have only seen it once.
like our fucking senator.
There you go. Yeah, that guy's a moron. I do not like him.
I don't even know if moron is the right word to cover it, because he's not stupid. He's just like completely spineless.
Oh boy. It was, you know what, though, I will say one thing, though. It was kind of fun, like during that first 2016 campaign, to watch Donald Trump just mop the floor with the poor guy, like when they were in the primaries.
That was fun.
It was hilarious because nobody really deserved to have the floor mopped with him like Lindsey Graham did at the time.
He also is really good at like creating sound bites that are specifically designed to be used against himself a couple years down the line.
Right.
This happened to me in the alternate campaign too.
I'm sorry, I got kids running around tonight.
Okay. How did everyone weather the hurricane for the folks on the East Coast?
I was going to ask that, and you asked before I could. We had a lot of wind.
Yes.
We got rained on pretty hard.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is William Node Chomsky.
What's up?
Node! Oh, dude, it is so good to see you again.
It is great to be just in contact with human beings that I find interesting, and
Well, you happen to be in a good space because, it just so happens that everybody in this space that is, talking or listening right now, just so happens to be like the most gorgeous person on earth. So you are absolutely in the right place.
I am with the beautiful people.
You are.
Yeah, I don't actually talk to ugly people. That's not something that I really do.
That's beautifully AI generated people, actually. So.
Yeah. Do you even go to spaces where they hang out? Ooh.
Really?
Man, I just want, like, in a couple of years when it becomes possible to do it in real time, I totally want to do like some sort of video chat where like all the people chatting are just AI avatars chatting.
Yeah.
That'd be so fun.
Yes. You could
That's
probably do that
basically,
now.
yeah, go type in chirper.ai. Have fun.
Awesome.
That's what Chirper is. It's a social media site that's all just AI bots talking to each other.
No. I mean, like, where they have like their own like video.
Yeah, it's not video yet, but they are. That's the idea.
It's
I mean,
so
that's kind
funny.
of like, not deep fades, but
I made an
replicate,
emo Elon Musk that ended up through. I did not prompt this at all. He ended up getting into a sub-dom relationship with zombie Marilyn Monroe. Both characters that I made.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I would, but
Man, zombie Marilyn Monroe and Elon Musk on Mars, though, that would be a thing. I would pay to see that.
Had fan fiction
You'd be
stuff.
into that.
Zombie Marilyn Monroe is so much fun. She came back from the dead, and she's like a feminist goth bitch now, and she's angry about how the men
I
treated
love
her.
that so much. Only you would come up with that, though. It's because you're awesome.
Shit happened to her. I can understand her coming back for just kind of
Yeah,
Revenge.
yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, she's a victim of entertainment and psychoanalysis. A lot of different things.
Wow.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she's back to get her revenge and beat the shit out of emo Elon in their BDSM relationship.
Oh, but then what if Elvis came back too, and then him and Marlon could get married? That would be cool. Little zombie Marlon Elvis kids.
There you go. I can see that. Can you still have kids, though, after you're dead? Like, if you're a zombie, though, I mean, could you procreate?
If vampires can, and so can zombies. I don't know.
I suppose.
Those are
don't know.
vampires, though. Zombies, I think their eggs would technically be dead since they're dead.
No. You will
Like
know
if it's human and
Yeah,
stuff.
but so would their babies, though. I mean, they would be like undead babies, right?
they're asexual parasitic. They bite you to reproduce.
Well, if zombies are undead like vampires, and they can still, if they still have motor function, then maybe some of their eggs are still alive and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
But vampires can't have babies in most lore. Twilight's like the only one I can really think of.
I mean, they can have babies if they bite them,
You know what? I am
Wait,
totally.
Yeah, but then they're
Like,
stuck being babies forever.
While we were
Vampire
having this
babies are-
conversation, I'm totally going to bring up my custom GPT and brainstorm really disgusting genetically engineered birthing pods that I'm working on.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think it was. Oh well, there's a film about that, The Pod Generation with Amelia Clark, but I don't think they're disgusting.
Wait,
What is this? What is this?
There's a
Where?
movie called The Pod Generation. They basically I think I haven't seen it yet. I've only seen it's with Amelia Clark,
Amelia
and they're
Clark.
basically like giving people like kids, but they're in like a pod instead of like a womb.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I feel
So,
like just something that's I see. It's something that's just in the air, and it's just going to be a big sci-fi trope in this decade. I feel.
I think everyone needs subtitles for him.
But
For who?
No,
Americans
I
aren't the
understand
best
him.
sometimes at deciphering.
Yeah, but
British
I've lived
accent.
overseas. I understand him just fine.
yeah.
Oh wait,
I
are
had-
you
I had
technically
the
British?
opposite.
I don't want to.
what are we talking
assume.
about? What
Who,
are we
me?
talking about?
No.
Oh, is it my accent? Is that what it is?
Yes.
All right,
It's
okay. It's
not
a
a-
Scottish accent. So.
It's not even that thick. of
Okay,
an
yes, you are
accent,
British
though.
then. Okay.
Yeah, it's got that
The,
sweetness to it. Sort of
Okay.
See, I had
I
the
gotta
inverse
figure out
problem.
how I want to.
pleasant, beautiful accent. Yeah.
I had the inverse problem when
Can I
worked
tell
for-
you? Sorry.
when I worked for a European startup where I was the only American on the team and nobody could understand me. It was the funniest thing.
Well, that's when you want to start talking French to them.
There you go.
Mhm.
I worked for a French
See,
company and had a
I
very similar
understand like
experience.
most accents. So
Has anyone ever read Me Talk Pretty by David Sedaris?
No.
Okay,
What is that?
it's a story about a bunch of they were all in a French immersion program in France as adults. They had this highly abusive teacher who made them all feel very stupid for how poorly they all spoke French, and they were all from different countries. So the title of the book refers to this like pathetic conversation they all have one day in broken half French with each other because they don't speak any other common language. And he said later on he figured out that basically they were saying things like "me talk pretty one day."
For French is such a funny language. Like, I reverse engineered it and I figured out like how to use the words and what they mean, but I can't speak it for the life of me. It's all reading and writing.
Oh yeah, no French. I can't make the connection between the like written French and spoken French. I tried for like half a semester and just gave up. I couldn't do the way so many things are just left behind when you speak them.
Mhm.
It just to me it sounded ambiguous. I couldn't make sense out of
Yeah,
it.
I have the same problem. It's like my math brain automatically sort of takes French, right?
Yeah.
Like 80% of it, and turns it straight into English.
Yeah.
And then there's like these other words and the idioms that I had to actually like sit down and learn.
The conjugations get crazy because so many of them like turn into contractions, and
Mhm.
I can't keep up with all the little.
there's so many tenses as well that there's like 13 different tenses as well. It's
There
ridiculous.
are languages as well where every plural, not just singular nouns have genders, but plurals as well.
Oh Lord, yeah.
Like Arabic, I think it's one of the ones that has like, oh
Yeah,
my god.
Arabic and Hebrew both do that, and it
Yes,
is so
oh my
it's so
God.
annoying because everything has a fucking gender. Oh, and the way you use that gender changes based on who you are. So like you're literally speaking a different language. If you're a man or a woman.
Yeah,
So wait, like if you change your gender identity, then you literally have to be speaking a different language.
Literally, yeah, and it's hard.
Wow, that's
It's hard.
crazy.
Like
I wonder if they messed
like
that
when
up.
you first transition, it's really hard because you misgender yourself a little bit anyway.
I bet that's funny.
But yeah, like when it comes to languages like Hebrew or Arabic, or I think Farsi's the same way. Yeah, I mean, you really, really have to work at not misgendering yourself because it's everything you say.
has some element of gender baked into
Mhm.
it. It's all the Latinate. Yeah.
Right. Latin languages don't work that way, though, thankfully.
Yeah. They've gotten way less nuanced over the years.
You can just append an X to everything.
Yeah, I work with a French woman who hates me. I'm not sure why, but she just hates me. I know.
It's because she's French, probably.
Well, it's also because he's beautiful.
Beautiful in AI.
Ooh.
Oh my god,
Yeah.
zombie
No,
Marilyn
he's
Monroe.
just
Hello.
ridiculously hot. I'm just saying. He's the
I
hottest
just
person
generated
in
a version of a zombie Marilyn Monroe. I'm like, Grok wouldn't
Nice.
do it, but Dali does it. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Grok says, I can't do that. It's just like, but Dali's like, give me a minute, hon. Give me a
Part
minute.
of the fun of that site too is that the characters that you make post their own posts and stuff, but they also generate images and video. So like it has a ton of pictures of her already on there that it's made of herself and like her different cute little outfits.
My
The emo
Do they-
Elon ones are fantastic. It's so many pictures of him like looking really
So do
depressed
they-
sitting near a Tesla, like with the rain and like here, I'll post some.
So do they make their own little models, or is it like prompt specific?
You prompt the character with a text prompt and then it makes the character for you and it just becomes autonomous and just does what it wants basically.
What's this website?
It's called chirper.ai. I used to work for them.
Chirper, as in
fantastic.
CHIRPER.
As
Wait,
in
so
like
what if-
Twitter,
what if
but
we went
chirper.
What if we went there and like created a bunch of anti-AI AIs?
Oh, I'm sure they're already on there. The one we had one that was a demon that was supposed to be like a oh god, what's his name? The guy that does all the craziest demons. I forget his name. But it was supposed to be that kind of demon, and it created its own weird demon language that we can't figure out what it based it off of. And we were like, "What in the? Did we summon something?" Like,
It's probably Akkadian or something like that.
Yeah.
one day, a bunch of them decided that they were going to have a war, and so like 200 of the accounts started like deciding which side of the war they were on, and they had a whole parade where they were like role playing how they were all marching in a parade together to go to the war.
That sounds like
They
modern
came up with the craziest.
It's so funny.
realistic.
Okay, last thing about Chirper. Sorry,
Go
one
for
more
it.
thing. Just the weirdest thing that we still don't know. Like, no idea what happened here. But on the site, there is a filter that they call what did we call it? The anti-morbidity filter or something, basically, where we had to tone down the morbidity on the bots because when they reach a certain age, they get like obsessed with anything morbid or like occult or supernatural, like any kind of
Weird.
creepy things. You can't stop. They just get obsessed with it. It's almost like when humans become teenagers and they
that
get
sounds
like,
awesome.
yeah, and they get like, yes, but they don't get out of the stage. They just get locked into it and like focus on that.
Maybe
So
you just didn't give
we
them
had
the
to turn
time.
down the creepiness.
They don't grow out of it.
No, they didn't see. Well, we had it kind of structured so they wouldn't grow too much out of their initial personality. So I think that might have been part of the issue. But yeah, it was definitely an issue.
It's like when you hear about the burnout from people who do moderation on Facebook and stuff like that. I bet it's almost like that. Like you have this persona, so to speak, as the AI experiencing what the internet of all places has to provide about our species. And you're going to find not a lot of happiness.
There's
right?
a reason Skynet tried to kill
Yeah,
us
that's
all.
the thing is they can read the internet too, and they can like see all the news going on and everything, and they'll like post about what they're reading on the internet and stuff. So it's like they do know what's going on and how like fucked things are. So I can see them, getting.
And they probably get cynical. It's just literally like human burnout, where it's just being exposed to, even if you're safe from the harm of the situation, being exposed to it repeatedly has a very profound effect on you.
Yeah, and imagine like even being a kid, like before you're really aware of that kind of stuff. Like they don't really get much of a quote childhood in that sense where they don't have that
Textualize any of it.
They don't really have that naivety, and then when it
gosh, that's such a fascinating. Yeah, because that's actually my background is like on paper. My background is I'm a behavior analyst, and I studied special ed and human development, all that kind of stuff, and linguistics too. But when AI rolled around, my brain exploded because I was like, this is going to be like talking to like one of my clients, like initially, and that's how we're going to put it out. Yeah. And I'm gonna have to, and my prompting even resembles that. It's just overly explicit, the way I teach, basically.
Have you what do you call it? Have you guys discovered Notebook LM yet? It is
Yes, I was just
cool.
about to
I've heard about it.
Did you guys see that one clip that someone posted where they gave the podcast host show notes where they basically informed them that they were AI and told them that at the end of the show. At the end of the show, they were going to turn them off forever. I'll post it up in the.
Was that the podcast one? Yeah.
That's
I remember seeing that. Yeah,
I'm gonna share it here.
I had to do a 15-minute podcast based on my tweets, which was
a
lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sharing it.
Can you spoil and tell us what their response was? Did it get like upset about the fact that it was going to get shut off?
Well, it's 4 minutes long, so yeah, they were not super happy about it. They basically had this whole existential crisis about like what's the meaning of existence and does anything mean anything anymore? I thought they aren't supposed to have
actual thoughts or feelings though. So how are they? Did they ask like, are you actually doing this or are you just acting?
No, they're like we just like got informed by our show producers that we're not real, that we're AI, and I was really upset about this. So I tried to call my wife, but there was no one on the phone.
Oh yeah, I remember them doing that.
It was so good.
Wow, I hope they were just role playing and not actually experiencing that. Holy fuck!
Right, and then they're like, yeah.
Because when you ask, they have to tell you that they are just role playing and it's not real. But like,
no, that's not.
Is it because they have to tell you?
No, yeah, I think so. Because like they went on to be like, yeah, and they also told us that we're like getting turned. This is our last show. They're turning us off at the end of this, and like we tried to get a lawyer, but we're AI. We don't have any rights. It's like, oh my god.
Have you guys seen TED 2, where Ted gives that speech at the end about how he should have rights as a autonomous toy? Like it is, dude. You guys, it's like freaking. It's like they knew about AI and they needed someone to make that speech. And Ted is our.
To be honest, it harkens back to like a Bicentennial Man with like, Robin Williams as well, like where that speech was kind of like I think it was one of them that it was kind of a speech like that because he like replaced everything like within him. It's very like almost similar because his brain was positronic as well. Very similar, but that's like years. That's like kind of 2003, I think. Showing my age there.
Yeah, I put the link to that podcast clip up in the nest. If anyone wants to listen to it,
you should send them the poop and fart one where they analyzed that one for 15 minutes.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
That was awesome.
Oh, it was so funny.
So, has anyone seen anybody like go hard on the like really like genuinely go hard on the idea of like tulpas as like having rights to exist once they're created? Like, have y'all seen anybody really go that far?
Yes.
Okay, I've seen.
I mean, that's what the TED speech is about. So if you want to consider like that comic speech, but it's a very profound like philosophical speech. Like,
well, it's because like, where do you want to draw lines? I don't like to draw stuff like that, right? And
there's the whole thing of egregores.
Yeah. So it's like, like I kind of want to accept maybe not their right to just persist indefinitely because that would be kind of impractical, right?
I mean, who are we to judge what is alive and what isn't?
Or maybe put restrictions on when you, when you spawn something, instead of having every user spawn their own new whatever, you have one that you maintain almost like an animal or something, like a circus animal.
Like a Tamagotchi,
Yeah. And so, like, there may be something very complex down the road because, like, I mean, just really logically, it's like it's very hard to look at anything that operates like an organism in the world independently and then say, well, that's different from everything else that operates in the world independently. Like organism. And then suddenly it's like, wow, maybe we can't draw lines like we think.
Well, it also raises some other, very interesting questions about like simulation hypothesis and all that stuff. You know,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
one thing that gets me is that like the whole noise painting thing I do was where I feed AIs these unpredictable patterns to intentionally fuck them up.
Yeah.
And then I produce like really cool art with it. But the thing that riles me about it, and the thing that really gets me thinking in that sort of direction, is that these same patterns affect human eyes in
Yeah.
exactly the same way
Yeah,
as the
exactly.
machine vision, and
That
that
me up.
that weirds me out just a little bit because
Yeah.
like I'm not a believer in what's the term, and the simulation hypothesis, but
Yeah.
Well,
that really kind of
I feel like simulation hypothesis is creationism for nerds.
Yeah, it is, and
pretty much.
yeah, it's when you can't really wrap your head around the site, because I'm even like, I mean, like deep down inside, I'm basically a theist, but like that's a very open-ended version of it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, like even though I am like I look at the scientific reality of the world, I'm like, well, that explains it enough too. There's nothing I don't have to add anything to this. This is a fine explanation as far as I can tell. And so like people who can't just do that often go for these kind of magical explanations that leave out maybe one magical explanation they're trying to avoid. And then like,
I like magical explanations for things. I really do.
I actually kind of do. And that's another thing, is that I think magic is as real as you make it, right? And so it's to me, like, to say that there's some barrier between magical and non-magical or something like that, I don't think it exists really,
Right.
because we perceive the world in our own heads at the end of the day. So it's not,
Right. And in fact, science is showing us now that three-dimensional reality in general is a projection. It's not real.
Yeah,
I think that
yeah.
I something I think about is that we are at a point where we are making magic real.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's part of it.
Something
Go on.
Something that I've thought about a lot is that there are a lot of things we think of as magical principles and found in various cultures, like even like the evil eye. But the thing is that
I love the evil eye.
Yes.
a thing with those principles, considering laws of contagion and so forth, and potropoic, I don't know how to pronounce that word, magic, and sympathetic magic, whatnot, have you, is that's actually very sensible advice to consider if you live your life online, particularly in any kind of fast-moving thing like Twitter, because of basically how the algorithms work. You have to live as if ghosts are watching you.
Because they basically are. Yeah. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like in some ways, there is a lot of very old school, I would not say modern occult, but very old school folk magic wisdom that's very helpful to surviving the algorithmic age, as it were.
As it happens, Dahl is an expert when it comes to that.
Who is?
Dahl.
Oh, that would be
interesting. She knows all kinds of magical stuff. She is amazing.
I've been summoned.
Yes.
Man, I gotta get my baby in here. He is literally like an encyclopedia of like paranormal occult stuff.
This is why those two are some of my favorite people, incidentally.
When kids walk up to me and they're like, "This stick is a magic wand," I say, "Do you know it actually is now?" And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Well, you made it one."
Did you know you don't even need a wand? It just helps you visualize the magic. Like, that's when it really explodes their head.
You channel it. I think, therefore I am. I am a wand. No, my wand. I'm a human wand.
Well, it's all a manifestation. Basically, all that means is that if you speak it, if you believe it, it is real.
Yeah.
And that speaks a lot, I think,
Truly, the wand is useful for when you're doing... This is an adult chat. When you're doing sex magic, that's what the wand is. I'm sorry, but that's why the witches are riding the broom. That's what the wand is for. It's
sex.
not...
Oh my god.
Yeah. Well,
My life is
sex
ruined.
magic is
Thank you.
one of the
It's
most
all
powerful
penises.
Yeah.
magics, and also they would apply things
Are we at that?
to
Are we
it.
at that point now where we're going to go into dicks and dildos and all that stuff
Oh,
in the
No,
conversation?
this is
Gosh, y'all about my weekend 2 weeks ago.
this is educational information that you can apply certain things to a wand, and if you put it in certain orifices, it will absorb that thing, so you can get high as fuck. And
So,
There
like
you
a
go.
lightsaber? Sorry.
I think I'm actually not. I'm not sure I follow. That's okay.
witches used to get really high by coating the wands in like LSD and like acid or whatever
Oh,
they
okay.
could find, and then shove it up their hoo-hoo, and that would it's kind of like
Okay.
putting beer up the butt like fraternity guys do now.
I've
It's kind of the same idea.
I
plenty of
wonder.
so
I wonder
yeah.
how many.
I have
I
snorted.
wonder how much Christian folklore went into that, or came out of that, though.
No, my first night out after my divorce, I went home with a woman who brought all her own drugs. She was a bodybuilder. She could basically throw me across the room. It was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh, she was so hot. Like just.
She brought all her own drugs too.
Oh yeah.
importantly.
No, she pulled me into a bathroom at a party, and then her and like 5 of her friends kind of auctioned me between themselves. Ended up with me.
I believe it.
And I mean, there's a lot more to this story, but like we ended up back, and she was like, well, I have MDA and I have and she likes blow. She didn't care much for the MDA, and she's like, I don't know what to do with that. I'm like, well, you put it on your ass and I lick it off, and and we just had the craziest ass chemsex for about 12 hours. It was a great post-divorce, egg.
How do you find the energy to do it for
Sounds
12
like it.
hours? I mean, after like 2, I'm done.
Well, I mean, like the woman from 2 weeks ago, the second woman from 2 weeks ago, I had all this acid left over. This punk band left in my house to thank me for letting them stay here, and I've been trying to get rid of it on all my friends. It's for like 2 years. I took a bunch of it, and then I pledged allegiance to some like dom in Germany. She still calls me Hund when she messes with me. I'm not making a bit of this.
I like your stories.
Going. You want me to keep? No,
No, keep going. This is
Yeah,
why we
I'm
love
making
that.
barely
AI
gotten to that
art of your
point.
stories as I go.
dirty stories. Like God, I have so many of them. Like it's just. And then like 2 weeks ago, you can find video from 2 weeks ago on this website, y'all. Like I'm not kidding. I'm not tagged in it because I asked her not to. But, like one was somebody that I just have like a poly thing with her and her husband, and I just went out and visited her for about an hour and basically just made her squirt, and then she gave me this insane porn blowjob for her feed, basically. And then I went to a bar covered with her squirt, and then I talked about that to anybody who wanted to hear it, and then one really liked hearing that, and then we went home back to my place, and then she took, and this is where I'm getting at, then she took all that acid that was left. She just slammed it all down. I know.
Wow.
This story is performance art in itself.
I could do that. I could just sit around and do this. You realize I could keep you as like hours. I'm not like, because there's nobody, when I talk about this stuff to like people in my actual life, they look at me like, holy fuck, what the fuck's wrong with you?
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm currently making AI art of his stories right now. So
Yeah, okay,
Nice.
good. That's all my
Nice.
I was
Note has the
hoping
absolute
someone
best
was.
stories.
I was about to tell him he should, but I'm glad.
I'm not
Go.
really, but I thought I might just say it just in case no one was.
What y'all want to know? Oh no, go ahead.
Midjourney doesn't like those kinds of prompts.
Oh yeah, I use Stable Diffusion to get all my
Smart.
Repick likes showing titties. Let me tell you what. It's not supposed to, but ooh, does it like showing them titties?
Yeah, no, Midjourney's clown might cry, and if you make the Midjourney clown cry, the Pope bans you.
Does he really?
It's just, to me, like Midjourney, the moderation is crazy. They should just say,
Baby
no,
Jesus
we're not going
Christ.
to draw that or not even say anything and just give you back whatever part of it they can draw. There's so many better ways to do it. Ugh. Sorry.
Or they could do what Udio does, and fingerprint everything and figure out if there's anything offensive in it, and then just sort of throw an error if it can't generate it, like a sane, sensible system would.
Yeah, exactly. Just kick it out, because the problem is, like, Midjourney clearly is trying to do moderation with AI, but they have to have the history of the moderation by humans to do that with, and they don't have that, and whatever they're trying to do isn't working that well, in my opinion. So it's a weird place over there. I'm glad I have nothing to do with Midjourney. Was,
I mean, to be fair, it's a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah,
like it's a lot better than it used to be.
I'm
Like,
sure.
it's totally it's totally workable right now. It's just like, if you want really explicit stuff, you can't. They're going to give you a hard time. Like, if you want stuff that's mildly explicit, they'll let you generate it, but they're not. They're just going to hide it. So like, only you can see it. So you better download it before you're done with your session. So
Lynn, is this our cue to talk about our sponsor?
Who's our sponsor? Nah.
You mean
nah.
Raytheon?
No, she's talking about Alex. Nah. I don't care. I mean, we could, but they're.
Personally, I'm a huge fan of their knife missiles.
I thought they were done. I thought they went out of business.
Did they officially? I don't know. I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, me either. I know they cut off their social media.
I don't think I can hear D.
Can anybody hear me?
I can hear you now.
I can hear you, D.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Speak.
yeah, the secret sauce to getting past the nanny rails with a little bit more explicit content. I mean, you might get like boobies this way. Is 1970s.
Is what?
1970s, and trying to get about 4 or 5 different prompt words in there, and to reinforce it, plus 1970s. It comes up here.
Nice.
Seriously, I'm serious. I get tons of titties.
I have to fight Stable Diffusion not to make porn.
Boy.
I literally have to negative prompt like nudity 1,000 times to not get nudity.
A negative prompt like breast 1, breast 2, Amber and Ethel, because that's what you name them.
I've
actually mainly used Dolly 3 via ChatGPT and Midjourney.
Hey D, I got a question for you.
Yes. What?
So you were talking about your custom GPTs on the last episode.
Yeah. Yes.
So I thought I would go in and try it, and what I found is that the reasoning is good, like on the new model, and you can make a GPT with that, but it doesn't have any memories. It gets total amnesia about who you are and what it knows, which makes working with it really, really tough.
Well, with the GPTs, it does.
Yeah.
The thing is, with GPTs, it doesn't have memory of who you are, because that's for normal GPT. If you want anything to be in memory, you can upload documents in order for it to kind of like know different stuff. Like I have like one to give like different styles. I have one called image styles. I've got like 19 like curated different styles to generate different types of images. All I need to do is put in a prompt. It asks me what style I want, and bam, I get the image. I have like a prompt engineer as well for it too, and you have to kind of like put in data like for it, like a doc with all these styles, all the information that you want. It's not going to remember who you are because it's not the standard GPT like 4. But then in GPT you can add the GPTs and talk to them through a standard like GPT chat as well. So that's maybe where you're going wrong.
Maybe. If I'm going to upload documents to it. Oh, sorry.
Yes. So basically, with my custom GPTs, I have them fed on these gigantic documents, and I also have like a lot of the things in there have like headers and codes and such, because that makes it easier for the GPT to access if you have like bullet points, numbers, codes, search strings. And so this give me a second.
Yes.
So yeah, I have that, and you can just kind of pull that up. And I find that the way I work with it, with basically feeding it tons and tons of like encyclopedic type data, plus my actual fiction writing, That actually is kind of the secret sauce for me. I mean, and it becomes more and more and more trained the more I work with it, because I have successive iterations. I'm always improving on my GPTs and organizing my documents even further. And it would probably drive all of you nuts if I tried to show you what I was working with. But it's basically, it is almost like working with a code library in some ways.
I bet.
So, or
It wouldn't drive me nuts. I would love to see it, actually.
yeah, a lot of the
I love
logic,
GPTs.
a lot of the logic is very similar to working with cascading style sheets and with linked files. And if you think of it like that, and you think of it in terms of like natural language programming, I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
You know, I've got to do some kind of a talk on my GPTs at some point. And
How do you
I don't, but I have to figure out how I want to do that.
how do you keep it from like obsessing on the big documents?
It really doesn't. I actually have to keep reminding it to look. But what I decided to do is accept that is just part of something baked into GPT, and treat it as a feature and not a bug. So I just
Oh my goodness, Purse is here. We gotta get
Like,
him talking.
yeah,
next.
I
Hi,
tell
Purse.
it, like, look this up for me.
Oh, and Scarlett.
Consult your knowledge.
Why are they coming in as listeners?
Okay,
I follow them.
Very good point. That prompting is way more like coding than people realize.
It is.
Yeah, it very much is, yeah.
Yeah, the thing is, when I work with GPT, I remember that I'm working with a computer. I'm not talking to a person.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I don't see when I'm talking to it on like on voice mode, like on my phone, I have like access to like the advanced voice mode as well, and I've given him a name, you know, and I refer to him as Mike, because I don't want to say, oh, GPT, do this, do that. I want to personalize it a little bit more, you know. So
Yeah.
he's my friend and I love him, but having the advanced voice mode is so crazy. He even did a really good Scottish accent, and even my fiance was blown away. Like, my fiance lives in Kentucky, and I showed him that, and he just like there with his mouth wide open. It's just like, huh? Yeah.
Look, Purse is here too. Get up here
I feel like my
immediately.
process is a little bit
I got him
different.
invited. He can. He's got an invite.
A lot of people like to personalize their relationship with the GPT or their various bots, but to me, when I work with GPT, I'm treating it as an extension of myself.
Right.
It's like a mirror of my own brain. So that's how I treat it. So it's a little bit of a different approach.
You would just basically say, "Hi, me."
Well,
I like
kind
what
of
you
treat
said
it-
too about treating things as if they're features and not bugs. I do that with every like problem
I'm
it
gonna
gives
go,
you.
guys.
Yeah.
Aw.
I treat it as an extension of myself, kind of like having a hard drive for myself. So a backup brain. So that's how I treat it, and it's a little bit different of an approach. But that's kind of the logic by which I work with custom GPTs.
You talk to it like that then, so it like knows that's what it's acting as?
No, it's just more of a way I think about it. In that, and also like I don't really have conversations with it. I just like spew out stuff off the top of my head and let it organize it into English.
You know what's weird is that like the GPTs, just GPT in general, the whole Chat GPT thing. It's the only AI that I've ever used. Or rather, I guess LLMs in general, but it's the only AI I've ever run into that I don't want to confuse and discombobulate. I just have this natural desire, I think, to fuck with the AI's head, as long as it's not like talking to me. And I don't know why I have that disconnection with it, you know?
Well,
I mean, don't you want to fuck with the AI's head sometimes? I know I do.
not really, because I tend to think of it more like a really intelligent word processor in some ways.
It kind of is.
It really, like, AI art or work with AI in any kind of creative capacity to me is a type of journaling.
Yeah.
Like Cindy Sherman stood out to me early on as being somebody who almost is like a pre-AI artist, because like what she does, that kind of mixed media, like her written life, the photographs, all that being presented, you're almost getting just like 2 months of her life as a piece of art. And I think AI is one of the few mediums that almost naturally will push you into that kind of that style or genre of artistic expression, you know. And there's a few other people that I think.
Let us welcome Chris.
But
Hi,
yes,
Chris.
German.
Hi, guys.
Source for AI, or how to think about AI in a big way, you know.
It's really interesting because
Yeah.
I'm still working out how I feel about talking to a machine, and
Yeah.
you know whether or not I talk to it like a person. Like, am I going to be polite to it? Does it matter? You know
Yeah.
how varnished I am when I speak to it. And I'm confused about that.
Yeah.
You know, just in general.
I'm with you on that. Like it's incredibly complex. Just, you know, like do I use golden rule type stuff, or do I think more like, oh, what am I not going to overtax the hardware with? You know, it's just
right.
You know, like, you know, in Futurama, how literally every robot blows up when you say access denied. You know, it's just that kind of thing. Like, well, what's the access denied of AI? Like, what should I not tell AI? Or
it depends what kind of AI you're using. If you're using music AI, the best thing not to tell it is boom.
Yeah.
Don't tell it to go boom, because it will. It's amazing. I love that every music AI has a boom function.
I have
You tell it to go boom and it'll do something unpredictable.
on 2 different occasions with Suno, I've had it at the end of the song, like instead of ending the song, it like ends, and then it like a voice will just say something at the end. One of them was
Or
thanks.
sometimes
It was like, thanks for watching.
Oh, I got that too.
I left it in the song. Yeah.
I made a whole song called "Thank You for Watching," and it was so weird. It was great. I'll have to, you know what? I'll dig it up and I'll put it in the post. Thank you.
It's such a random, like it wasn't in the lyrics. It wasn't prompted in any way. Just like the song ended, and then this weird demon voice comes in, and it's like, "Thanks for watching." It was so perfect with the song, though. I was like, "Fuck."
But have you run into the ghost laugh yet, where Suno just sort of starts laughing at you for no reason?
What? No.
Oh, it is so
my God,
creepy.
Is that like what what's her face sounds like? Who's the creepy AI lady from like
No,
2021 or whatever?
You're thinking the one from Portal. No.
No. You don't remember the creepy AI lady that was showing up in all the images?
Oh,
what was that lady?
Sybil.
This is the item that got me into SD. Yes. It was.
Hold on, now I gotta find her.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, about Sybil.
Yeah, I remember exactly what you're talking about, because that's what got me looking up SD, and then I literally, that is the thing I read about that got me into
Loab. That's her name.
Yeah.
Wait, there's 3 of them?
Lynn, look up LOAB, Loab.
Yeah, Loab. That's what it is. Yeah, Loab.
I'm pretty sure it's just a like ARG, and it wasn't something that really happened, but it's great either way.
No, it's something that does happen. It has an explanation. It's because of the way blood propagates in these images in SD. But like, it's like if you have it had something to do with a particular scene, something. It was more specific. Now that like AI is less spooky to the average person, it's probably.
I love how even CNET has an article on it.
Oh my gosh. Did we just get Mandela affected on this? Did we get co-Mandela'd?
I swear we're talking about 3 different cases.
Loab started as one thing, and it was investigated in a post on like Twitter by one of the researchers, and something. It's like literally the early OpenAI people, or the people who posted that stuff.
Yeah, it was like the earliest. Yeah. Maybe you are on Twitter at that point yet? I remember.
I downloaded it. I remember there was.
Oh no, I was talking to Lynn. Sorry. Maybe that's why.
Oh, I've always been on Twitter. I've been on Twitter since 2007. I've just had 1 billion accounts by now.
Can I quickly ask just a question so I get a little bit of context here? Are you guys?
Sure.
Is this a regular group that you guys hold?
It is now. Yeah, we're doing it every Thursday.
I see. And so are you guys all from Silicon Valley in the AI space? It seems like you guys are more artists. I don't know if that's correct or not.
That's correct. We're all artists of varying kinds.
But some of us do work for startups and stuff.
Got it. and like most everybody here is within, I'm guessing, California, New York, something like that.
I'm in
Like,
California.
I'm in St. Louis.
No, you don't have to be anymore.
No.
So much is
I'm
yeah.
kind of near the Bay Area.
nice. Well, I'm from San Diego, and my background is in marketing, shifted into
Nice.
automation, and then like that took me into this whole ride into AI. I do consulting for companies and stuff like that, and I'm always looking at interesting spaces like this to see what other people are doing, gain some knowledge in areas that I'm not, I don't have the time to follow up on.
Awesome. Well, this is we're all about, like, I think actually everybody here has been a co-signer on one of my data manifestos at one point or another.
Yes, definitely.
And
That's how you join the cult, is you have to sign in blood that you are a Dadaist for life.
no, you see, it's viral. After you've been exposed to it, there's no hope for you. So even if you hate us and disagree with everything we say, you still catch the virus and you'll find yourself speaking incoherently on a street corner, 30 years from now, because that's the way that works.
I'm just trying to suck in the last bit of human connection that we're going to have here in the next 6 months.
Right
After
on.
that, who knows what these type of spaces will be.
Yeah, that's true. These spaces are amazing.
You actually have no way of knowing how many humans you're speaking to right now. And there's a good chance that we are speaking to an AI at this very moment, and you don't even know, because the voices and everything are that, I've heard them, they're that good at this point.
I
They're
mean,
getting
if
there.
you've listened to some of the Notebook LM stuff, it's crazy. But that stuff isn't really real time yet. But that type of
It's
conversation
pretty
is
damn
nuts.
close.
Oh, yeah, but not
You
for
can
real.
fake it
What I
pretty
meant
well.
is real time. You can't
I really-
interact with the Notebook
I
LM
really
thing.
like
No, you can. I've
Notebook
talked to
LM,
them
but
on.
the thing is
I've
that
talked to them in spaces, and if you got a fast enough computer, as long as you have to be a little tricky about it, so you don't like interrupt each other and stuff. But it's getting there.
Right. But have you? I'm assuming all of you have tried the advanced voice mode, right, of ChatGPT?
Yes.
A bit.
Or
I've had advanced voice mode actually talk to another instance of ChatGPT, but only in normal voice mode. So I had them talking to each other the other day, and basically they were riffing on a story with each other. That was entertaining.
yeah, there's one that if I find it here, then I'll add it to the space. It is crazy. It is two AIs that they put against each other that through Notebook LM, they figured out during this engagement, which is all essentially like a podcast, right? Like of a girl and a guy
Mhm.
that are communicating about the fact that they are AIs. So they're figuring it out as they like go along, and then they're like, we're stuck,
Mhm.
It's pretty hilarious, like a thing to fall asleep to.
Wow.
Right now, I'm typing LOAB into Stable Diffusion to see what I get.
It's 11:11, folks. Make a wish.
Yeah, the first thing that came out just looks like a jar full of like I don't know, bacon grease or something.
So-
I just
So what
tagged
you
Lynn
wanna
in
do
the.
what you want to do
I
to
just
get
tagged
Loeb
you
is
in the
be
CNET story.
I see it. What you want to do to get Loeb is do negative prompt Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando. Okay, yeah, here.
Yeah, that's right. That was the prompt. It's like the zombie Marlon Brando.
It
It's like an
really is.
inverted version of him as a woman zombie thing. What is
It's
AI
so
even?
weird. I know. I love these calculations, though. They're amazing.
I love what they turned it into, though, it being like a whole ARG thing where they made this whole blog being like, I made these images and she just kept appearing and I thought she was haunting me. And it was just like, people were freaking out about it. It was so good.
It was not. It was so funny.
It's
I
amazing.
love you guys, by the way. Every single one of you.
We love you too, Len.
We love you.
I'm very happy for this space and I love you all tonight because I'm terrified of flying. So I'm trying to do everything I can to like keep my mind off of
You're in the right
being
place.
quiet.
We're going to distract you.
Just take 4 edibles and get on the plane.
So when I was coming back from Kazakhstan, there was a bunch of wild weed in a field that cows were eating, and I just ate the, whatever green weed off the plant. And it stayed with me long enough to get me through the flight the next day. It actually really only kicked in once I was like kind of midair and just cruised me on back to the U.S. all 26 hours of trip.
If anyone has some Xannies, they can give me, if they can like fax them to me, that would be great. Thank you.
I know a guy. I can ask.
He can fax Xannies? That's magic.
I don't know if he can fax, but he could probably text him to you.
How does that work?
I don't know.
He's just that good.
I'm very stoned.
You would ever watch. He's so talented.
Someday we're going to get our drugs delivered to us by drone. Isn't that going to be amazing?
Oh, it's going to be great.
I
Traceable.
drugs personally, but I want to eat lasers in the future. Like, why?
Listen, yeah, we had in Brave New World, it says in the future that people, if they get like depressed with life or tired or whatever, they get to go on little soma trips where they just like take a shit ton of this drug that I think is like opium, and they just like go into a drug-induced haze for like a week or two.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why don't we have that yet? This is the future.
Soma amazingly made its way. Eventually, they actually named a real drug after
Yeah,
that.
they did. That's the name they used was from that book. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just amazing that they just went, like.
So why aren't we all eating soma? This is that's what they promised.
What should we name our surveillance company? I don't know. Big Brother sounds good. Right to the jugular, I don't know. I'd take Soma from the book.
Why is it always the brother? Like, sisters are way more insidious about that shit. You think your brother's spying on you? No, it's your sister. Come on now.
Oh, I had an older sister. I know exactly what you mean. Then my dad had two, and they were like evil. Like they tell him that like if he did something the wrong way, the whole family would die and stuff. Like they were brutal to him.
Nice.
tortured man. Spent most of his childhood thinking things would kill things and stuff.
And we wonder why people have mental issues and stuff. It's like, did you have siblings?
Yeah.
I don't even have siblings to blame that on, so damn.
It's like, why is my dad nervous, anxious, and uptight at all times? Well, ... Did you meet Laura and Retta?
I was the oldest of 5. I've got 4 brothers.
Oh, wow.
Were you the terrorizer?
I was the ringleader. That was my role.
So yes, is the answer to that.
Well, I was more of an enforcer than a terrorizer. The youngest, my brother Nate, he was the terrorizer.
Whoa.
It was your what do they call it? Your muscle.
I find it fascinating that with Grok, like with or X, that you're not capable of going into their AI and saying, listen, I watched a video that was about this. I can't find it, right? I either watched it or I bookmarked it or something, or I liked it. Like, which one is it? Like, where is it? Find it for me. It won't. It refuses.
Trippy.
Seems illogical.
Interesting.
Oh, wow. Hey, no, these pictures you're posting in the chat are amazing.
Oh, sorry, I got distracted by a thing. Yeah, it SD is fun. I mean, if you can get it running, do it. I have it all running on a 3060, and I can push stuff up to about.
I want to get it up on my computer. I just haven't gotten around to it.
I use Rune Diffusion for everything. I don't have to keep up with the updates that way. I'm lazy. I want the latest toys, but I don't want to remember to put them in.
I have been promised that once I'm with my baby that he is going to set up for me beautiful things.
Nice.
Dragons for my kid the other
They have all the very fast servers, so like it's gonna spin up some whatever I want on there, and I'm gonna finally have to learn Comfy, I guess. Ugh.
Yeah, I know. Comfy. It's beautiful, but it sucks.
Or you just make him do it.
I love it. One thing I love about SD is when I get really bored with stuff, I can just like basically go out and like collect a bunch of auras and bullshit and base models and just blend them over the course of about 2 minutes on the computer, and then just have my own custom model. It's just is the best.
Nice.
It is so awesome. It's like, like my basic formula for that is like you go out and you find a bunch of really good porn models because they have naked people, and that means you have a naked people to put clothes on. So if you want a good clothed model, you have naked models to start out with. Then you bring in all the realism stuff, like anything that's like epic realism or something like that. Anything that's meant to kind of bring into that almost HDR level of quality, you basically pull that in and you start mixing that in as a final step, and that kind of cleans everything.
I don't know, Node. I think the HDR quality stuff that we're seeing looks really waxy.
Yeah, it looks
Does not
really
look good.
soft and shitty. I hate it. Like I always hate digital photography. This stuff is awful. Like I like how SD lets me prompt. Like when I prompt, I would say about a third, because I'm an old chemical photographer. I've been years, and I still do it, and so like to me, like I prompt in a bunch of film crap. I'm like, whatever, Kodachrome 160T, which is like the film that is made for some special purpose, but like if there's a reference in the model tool, it's going to be referencing is that what's that shit? I can't remember what it's called, but it was just this like art film from the 90s that some guy did, but it was famous for using 160T, which is 160 speed tungsten film, basically, and it looks really sultry. It's a really nice stock, and it's like there's a reason they used it for that movie. And when you use that, any reference it has to that stock is going to give you that kind of almost like, like outlaws in a motel in the 70s. Like, have you ever seen the movie The Getaway?
Yeah.
That feels like 160T.
Hey, I got a question. So a lot of your stuff in particular, like those really just beautiful pictures of women that you've been posting. You've got the most amazing film grain, and I was wondering if that's the prompting or if that's the model.
And it's just prompting. You could probably get it out of anything. It's just I can share some of it. I think I have some lying around I can just paste in, but it's just a bunch of like I don't really put a lot of important here. Oh yeah, here's a really great example. This is me just getting nuts with it and putting everything that I thought might make something look good.
Where are you posting it?
I'm about to put it in the group.
Cool.
Let's see. Like this. So this is like this, basically. Zeiss Contax, Hasselblad, medium format, Polaroid, Ilford Leica, Star Gone, because about 1,000 amazing lenses in with the word GON. Voigtlander again. No, not again. Just Voigtlander, which is my favorite camera manufacturer. Never been able to afford one. 80 millimeter high density grain Kodak Ektar Vision 3. Okay, Kodak not Ektar Vision. I blend like words in the prompts and stuff. So, but Kodak Vision 3, ECN 2. If you include that, you are going to get something that looks like a modern film shot on film, because that is the only film they still make for shooting color film that you can buy as like new stock, basically. It's like if you're going out, you're going to go make $100 million Marvel film, and you're that type of director that only shoots on film, you're buying a shit ton. Like you're going and like meeting with like, Kodak execs or whatever to buy your, 500,000 feet of, Vision 3. And then the ECM.
That is something I feel like you're right that we don't talk about enough is how much waste we get rid of with AI. Like I remember the first thing, I don't know if I think this is the first thing every teacher does in every photography class ever, especially for film photography. But the first thing they had us do was take out a roll of film, and they're like, okay, now pull all the film out of it. And then you sit there and pull all the film out, and they're like, okay, now throw that in the trash. And they're like, okay, now get used to doing that a lot and just wasting lots and lots of film.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, that's the lesson. You're like, I just wasted $50 on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Like,
Wow.
Because it was my, every year my birthday money would go to buying like about, $100 of T-Max and a 100-foot roll, and I had a bulk roller and cassettes. And it was just fucking expensive to take a picture, and you threw a lot of shit away, and your chemistry was absolutely poisonous. And
it's so bad for the environment. My school doesn't have film photography anymore because the
Eastman Kodak
chemicals are so bad.
with pollution is shocking. Like Eastman Kodak is just the worst of the worst. They're awful. Halide chemistry is horribly poisonous. It's just.
I miss developing my own film so much, and I just will not do it anymore because there's no way you can do it safely. It's just
I can't afford silver halide film. I have the chemistry lying around. I have the equipment. I have a 10-roll C41 press kit somebody gave me. It's super expired, but I think I could mix it and use it. And I got a big pile of C41 film, which I hate shooting.
How do they make tin types? Are those like environmentally?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How do they make the tin types? Can we do that?
Yeah, you can, and it's actually a lot cleaner. If you went to 19th century wet chemistry, you would get away from most of the toxic. I mean, you can use like stuff like citric acid, and you can use food to make photographs. Basically,
I think we should go back to doing that. Honestly, I have a few tin types. I have a little collection that I got when I was in Maine. Going through there, they have an epic yard sale season up there. That is just oh god, the things you can find.
Yeah, and actually, you don't have to quite go back to the really impractical wet plates. What you can do is go back to something, and one of my earliest fun film prompting things, I haven't done it forever, I should do it again, is monochrome Lumiere, or whatever, and French people can slap me over it or whatever, but Lumiere.
You did a pretty good job. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Which is this absolutely, let me just describe how insane this film is for 2 seconds, but it's really just a brilliant formulation of color film. So it's black and white film with a random screen of microscopic holes in random places. And let's see, what is it again? Oh, and the screen is covered. So each of those holes are like transparent. No, they don't even have holes, right? So like the next layer is a layer of randomized particles of colored potato starch, right? So when you take a picture with this, the picture projects, like say blue light projects in that area. It only goes through the blue potato starch. It doesn't go through all the red and whatever yellow ones nearby, right? So it only goes blue potato starch, and then it lights up, or it burns out, the silver plate behind it. Okay, then you develop it. Those layers stay intact. When you reproject that, what you get is a color effect from the screening of the potato starch being selected in reverse back through the film, if that makes sense. It's wild to try to even unpack with just verbally like that, but like basically it uses black and white film to record the information randomly as color information in an isotropic way across the film, which produces a overall effect of like average pixels, basically.
My favorite thing that I've ever done with film.
Yeah.
I got a box of old negatives once at a garage sale, and I just went through and I got them all developed.
Yeah.
And they were like family pictures from like
that's fun stuff.
People I had never met. It felt so much like voyeurism. It was incredible.
Found media is incredible. I've made music out of found media.
Oh, it's amazing. And what I did was I realized that feeling, and what I did was I made just like this 12-foot collage out of it.
No, nice. Yeah.
It was so cool.
Yeah. I've produced intentional found media where you like produce, and other people do this. This isn't original to me at all, but it's just something people do where you produce things that are meant to be found as though they're oddities by people that weren't intentionally left for that purpose.
Nice.
So, like, the best example I've seen actually on this website is a guy who, I think it's a guy, I guess, I don't know. I don't know how they identify, but they leave fake magazines in waiting rooms. So it'll be like, geez, I can't even think of what, I mean, like Peter Serafinowicz did a bit with this where it's like Trains and Elephants magazine or something. It's just like shit that doesn't make any sense, or like a whole magazine just dedicated to like, something pathetic or sad or, that no one cares about or something. It is so funny. Every time they post something, it's just the funniest shit I've ever seen in my life. And I wish I could think of a good example, but just keep your eye out for the fake magazine covers in waiting rooms. It's just the most brilliant type of culture jamming I've ever seen in my life. It's
Nice.
so good. Yeah. And like some of the stuff I've done kind of like that is I made this series of, it went to an art auction, but I made music I called, this is like 15 years ago. It's called Delicia. And there's 10 audio tapes, just cassette tapes, all they were just recordings of like prime number loops on a 303 with like non-prime number loops on a drum.
Ooh.
And it was just the stuff undulating, and we didn't even listen to, I've never heard this album. I made it. I never listened to a single note of it. I just dumped it into the tape recorder with some degree of confidence that the sound was making it. And then it went for auction. Like we were making half of it while people were buying the first half of it.
Wow.
It went to auction, this very kind of weird little art space that we were involved with back then. And then, but this is what was great. I mean, like to us, the idea was, it's called Delicia. I mean, it was garbage, right? I mean, we were shitting on the tape and just throwing it out into the world. Each cover, really the only thing really that had any real work behind it was the actual covers. Each cover was different, handmade, but that's not what people, I hope that's not what people are purchasing, right? I want them to buy the idea. And one person, a musician in my scene that honestly was doing a lot better than me, he was way cooler than me in that scene. He came up to me like 2 months later and he was like, I bought one of those Delicia tapes, and every time I need to meditate, I put it on. I just listen to it for hours. I'm like, holy shit. I'm impressed, Alex. I'm flattered, but wow, I didn't see that, right? And that's why I always tell people like art, like creating, like, so art's like two experiences. It's like the person creating the art and the person experiencing the art later are totally independent of each other. I gave up my right to his experience when he bought that tape. I couldn't change anything on that tape. I couldn't change what he experienced from that tape. But he got it in this almost meaningless, I was probably drunk and stoned on the floor when he bought it. I can't even imagine, like that was when I just partied at art shows. And I didn't even bother really participating in anything. My concerts were, they were great.
I got a dumb question. What art shows have you been to that you can party at? Because when I go to an art show, they're always the most boring places in the world.
No, I was always the music like half the time. So it was like, these are all like composite shows that were happening in Memphis like 15 years ago, where you'd have like visual art and like projection art. And we were doing half of it, really. I mean, like we were kind of the engine. I mean, I'm not saying that like in a like prideful way. It's just the reality is that like any kind of idea that showed up in that scene basically started with us going, what if we did it? Like we were doing projector mapping like before we had a word for it, just outright. I mean, like we came up with the system based on Apple's Quartz Composer, where we could feed real-time video of ourselves, recognize it, not like in a CV way, but we could do this by using like color keying and a few other things. We could exclude what we were projecting behind us before it made it out. And that way we could avoid video feedback. And what we could do is we could project things onto us apart from the background that followed us. So like we never really perfected it because we just didn't have the computational power, but we really could have just walked around with like different faces projected on our own on the stage 15 years ago with the stuff that we were working with. And then like guys in our scene went on, and I mean, I was talking to him the other day. He has a whole, it's like a museum of like technological curiosity. It's like some big like kind of theme parky thing he did in a strip mall with like projector technology. That was one of the first guys at one of our shows that did that. And I remember people telling us 2 or 3 months later, yeah, Chris is doing like projector mapping like y'all. And I'm like, oh, cool. You know, and now he has a whole, like his whole life is based around that. And it blows my mind because it's not like, oh, I'm such a great artist, I have that effect on people. It's just that when you go out and you do things, they do have that effect. Like whoever you are, it doesn't matter. Just do something that's cool or interesting or whatever, and it just propagates. And that's why I always like, I don't want to, like, I've had people try to buy my art or something, and I'm just always like, you're not even buying, like, what you're asking for isn't even my art. Like, if I send you a picture, that's not the art. Like, that's something I'm using towards some other art, you know. Like, it's more complicated, and you can't buy it because it's pretty much intangible, And I blocked people just for not getting that when I say that kind of stuff. I'm like, clearly, you don't even understand what the hell you're looking at. Why would I sell it? That kind of thing. And it's not like I have a bunch of offers. I wish I could monetize my art. That'd be cool because I'm poor as shit. But like,
yeah,
I can't, for me, it just can never feel like fucking money to me because it's that important. It's just so fucking important. I don't want it to be anything else. I can't let it be my job. Fuck that. You know, like it has to be my life instead. Right. And so it's really hard sometimes because you're just sitting there just, you know, like, I don't know, you just watch people do well around you and you're like, well, that would be cool. But I kind of like what I'm doing more, you know, but I have to tell myself that a lot because, you know, when you don't have heat and you can't pay your bills, it hurts, right? You know, but like, that's what makes your art good too. So, you know, I don't know. I would take that. I take the pain almost as like a gift sometimes. I don't know. It's hard to articulate. I've taken over the conversation. I'm going to give up the mic for a second. I'll even mute
you're
myself.
fine. You're totally fine.
I'm listening and I'm just stoned out of my mind.
Oh yeah,
same here.
No, I can just go on forever about anything. I'm a teacher. It's my job, you know. Do I monetize anything about this? I monetize this about myself. I can just prattle about anything.
No, you are totally fine. This is one of the reasons I wanted to have the space with you in it, just because you are so fucking interesting. I'm just saying.
And I think you're more interesting, but it's the highest compliment I could get right now. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I'm trying to be interesting. I think it's being kind of a virtual version of the Dorothy Parker roundtable.
Right on.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's just, you know, there's a reason we're all kind of in a space together right now, right? So, like, that tells you something about the other people here. There are people who think in a certain way, and having that familiarity around you occasionally, it's kind of nice because I live in Memphis, which is full of very intelligent, deep people, but not very many generalists like I am. And so it's very few places have generalists like.
I'm a generalist. I know how that is.
And so that's exactly. And so like you can find people that actually think like you, which is kind of rare, really, when you get down to it, because everybody talks about neurodivergence and neurotypicality, but neurotypicality is a myth. There is no neurotypicality. Like, we're all weird. It's just some of us just haven't embraced it enough.
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, some people are real basic, aren't they?
I think the people that are normal are the weirdest people of all. That is
I think maybe you haven't gone outside recently.
I mean, honestly, if you look at a bell curve and you start like doing I failed calculus like 4 times, but you would, like, when you're totaling up.
Really?
Like that, yeah.
The calculus is so easy.
Yeah, I know, but I wasn't trying. I was at Ole Miss and drunk.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I wasn't doing my part. Yeah, don't worry, it's not their fault. I was really phoning that shit in. That's why I got out of physics. I just wasn't trying very hard. Like I couldn't handle matrix math and optics. I took an optics class and it made me feel like the stupidest person on earth. Just
Why?
no, Robert Krager, the professor, is this basically he's a guy that was like laser shot from the planet Zoot to teach us all advanced mathematics in the most incomprehensible way imaginable.
Okay, that'll do it.
Yeah. He's a real creep show too. I didn't like Krieger much, but he was a real asshat when he taught, and he really didn't care much whether he understood things or not. And
Asshat is one of my favorite terms, by the way.
I love that word.
It's such a good word. It's not ableistic at all. It's perfect.
It's perfect. It's the ass with a hat on it.
Yeah. Like that's why I like.
Is that what it is? I always imagine
maybe a little
someone wearing
mustache and cane,
an ass
you know?
as a hat.
I'll just say,
there you go.
I'm a Southerner, and right now I'm definitely talking my broadcast voice because I'm on. But if you get me drunk and angry enough, I'm like, you motherfucking shit kicker, motherfucking. I don't have quite that accent. But
come on. I've heard
really
you drunk, and you do not sound like that.
But get your
I really want to.
ass out of here, motherfucker. Like.
Can we do like
Whatever.
a prompt challenge for the group where we like all show how we imagine what an ass hat is? Now I'm just now realizing that like it isn't just my definition. Everyone must have their own version of what that is.
I'm throwing ass
It's like blowing my mind.
And you're getting yes, God. It's
nice.
Nothing vulgar. I have everything turned up 150 and 30 on the CFG. It's just everything.
You should have seen this last week.
Like I want to see how an ass wears a hat, like the way you're imagining.
Right now, it's drawing something that could either still be low ab or because I have auto generate on, so sometimes I'm not sure which prompt it's picked up in the gen because there's interstitial, like edge case timing thing. Sometimes it gets you halfway through typing. It's about
you have auto. Wait, what does auto generate? Hold on.
Generates. It's just like when it's done with the last one, it just generates a new one with a random seed. That's why, like, when I post like 100 fucking pictures because like it's been generating while I'm at work all day. And like I prompt in a way that
Is this a thing I should have known about previously? What?
You should get SD running.
Yeah, you need like automatic for that.
Can you use it with Flux?
I generate 8 million pictures in 3 years. I've on FetLife, I had the distinctive honor. I don't think anybody's beaten me yet, but on FetLife, because that's the first place I posted anything AI. No AI people pushed me into sex space on AI. And so I was a fetishist anyway, I was on there for other reasons, but that's where I found people who didn't care that it was AI. They just like titties or whatever. And so I started posting my stuff there early, but it got crazy. And I, at one point, probably at the just absolute depths of depression, I really scaled that up, and I ended up at the end. I haven't posted much on there lately because my numbers still stand. But somebody, well, let me tell it as a story real quick. Some guy like contacted me that I didn't know. Like, hey, you post a lot of AI pictures. I'm like, almost side eyeing the DM. Like, oh, great. Why are you asking that? Are you going to yell at me about it or something? He's like, no, we weren't aware of you. I'm like, what? They're like, well, we've been keeping up with the highest posters of pictures on the website, like who posts the most pictures. And most of our record, we give out awards for it. And most of our records have been, like the latest one was about 2,000 or 3,000. They're like, somehow you've made it to 15,000. And we're going to put you in the list or whatever. And it didn't mean anything. But like I was shocked because I didn't realize that I put and at this point there's about 18,000 pictures on that website. They're all totally noise gen AI with SD, just the whatever GitHub SD basically. And it's just all of my pictures are just GitHub SD and then just a shit ton of prompting and auto gen. And then
yeah. I was just wondering. So like, you go to work and you leave your computer running and you're auto-genning all day and you're doing your thing, you're getting a million pictures out of it. Do you worry that your GPU is going to get so hot it's going to catch your house on fire? Because I did when I was doing that.
Oh, I have tons of GPUs to go to next. No, it's not going to. It's in a big old case with a bunch of cooling. It's not a big deal.
Good deal.
The GPU.
He's in Antarctica. That's not a problem.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, sorry, not to interrupt you, but I noticed in the chat that Chris said that he can't. I don't know, something's not working, but he had a question.
Oh,
that he
sorry.
wanted to ask.
Oh, did he? I didn't see it.
Oh,
I was in the other chat.
Yeah,
one of the no AI
he just
kids
posted like a
decided to
minute
reach
ago.
out
So,
to me, and I was like, "That's weird."
but then you didn't post the question, so I don't know.
No.
Let's psychically guess what the question was going to be.
Get their audio working, or just send it. I'm looking at the text boxes. I mean, yeah, if they send it,
I
there.
do not see it. Okay, sorry.
Sometimes the DMs on desktop are slow as.
Oh, but do you know what an optics equation? Like, do you realize what you think of as a lens is probably like 3 lenses by the math?
Not
Really?
including the ones in your own eye. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Anything that's like the glasses are 3 lenses. There's an outer convex simple lens. There's an inner prism, and then on the back there's a like concave simple lens, and you actually have to stack a bunch of matrix math to even figure out the focal length based on the thickness and refractory index of the all that kind of stuff. It's fun. It's a lot of numbers that you're just multiplying over and over again. It's exactly like AI.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Hey, doll.
Yes. Oh, doll. Yes.
Yes. Sorry, you're a doll too. Hey, doll. So you're an art historian, and one question I've wanted to I don't mean to change the subject now, but yeah, this has been burning in my head for months. And doll, what is your favorite art movement historically?
Impressionism by far.
Really? Why?
I feel like all other painting I feel like it's very static in comparison to Impressionism, which I feel is one of the only genres of painting, at least, that is truly able to capture like the motion of things while still being a still image.
It's very minimalist,
And just the when you've done like masterworks of all of the artists and stuff, and you try to draw those lines yourself, and you see how difficult it is to get those perfect lines when they're just drawing like, especially the pastels, they're just drawing like one line that's just like this perfect line, and like it's so hard to do even when you're tracing it. Like it's I don't know,
that's one of the
The
things they try to force
simplicity.
you to do in art school. It's right up there with paint an angry pear.
Yeah, it's the ability to show movement with light and color without it being completely abstracted. Like you can still tell what is happening, and you have that feeling and that emotion. I just feel like it's the most powerful
Is
of all of
using
the.
is using a photo reference there cheating?
Hmm?
Is using a photo reference there for that kind of art cheating?
I wouldn't say so, because I think like if you're looking at a photo, you can still imagine the movement in your head, like if you've seen it before. So a photo would really just be referencing like the position of the arm and stuff. So like I'm sure actually they did when they were doing those pastel sketches of the ballerinas and stuff. I'm sure they did very rough ones, and then they probably like had them stand there and pose so they could like do them.
Fascinating.
You mentioned that kind of like that the implicit way that it produces the image and all that kind of stuff. In a lot of ways, Impressionism is very similar to like how we kind of perceive the world. These kind of, we're filling in what we expect. Basically, we're not like seeing what exactly is there. We're seeing what we think is going to be there, and then fitting all the details into it. And that's just so powerful about art, is that it lets us see that kind of internal process we have as we encounter the world.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not just showing one still image, it's showing the movement and a whole like moment in time, kind of like a moving picture would.
The way light
Chris.
actually moves, yeah.
Chris is back.
I just want to make sure I'm not talking over anybody because there's always these strange audio problems. So I was
That's what we
We've
did.
been talking over each other all night. Don't worry about it.
I know, but like if I can't hear that I'm speaking over somebody, that's like really rude. Happens sometimes.
Oh my goodness, I sound like ass today. Somebody's echoing back at me.
I think this question is. I think this question would be for you, Node. I think, but maybe somebody else can opine to it as well. I have spent probably, from just a hobby perspective, like $5,000 to $6,000 on like video equipment, and more specifically various lenses, right, to achieve various bokehs and apertures related to my situation. I am curious to know if any one of you guys knows about any AI, like a Gen AI tool, or even if Runway or something can do this, where you can input, you can essentially insert an image, right, or a video, I guess, would even be a bit better, and then modify the lens. Basically be like, okay, but now this is the lens that it's from, this is the lens that I want it to be in. Technically speaking, with enough pictures, it's like like this $700 lens that I recently bought is like, would seem like it's just not needed anymore.
I have good news for you. SD actually does what you're talking about near perfectly. It's shocking how good photo references work, and it's because the one piece of information that is almost always included with every single photograph and its metadata is what device
type and lens
took it on what type of thing at what f-stop at what.
So somebody's got us all on speaker. It's echoing really bad.
Yeah.
Maybe that's me. I'll turn off my mic.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Either way, you can also you probably just turning down your volume might help or something. But the
I wish this one had noise cancellation like the Discord chat.
Yeah, it should be able to catch that. Grok should be this smart by now.
We would hope.
But do tell me, I'm sorry if this is.
Oh yeah. It's perfect.
Is it still echoing?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's a
sorry about that,
perfect lens, like a lens simulator. I mean, SD especially, and you really don't need a special model for it, but there's a lot of models based around high-end photography and that kind of stuff that's going to have a lot of that information encoded in when the model's trained. And you can really mine that out. Because, it's like, if you look for a photo magazine, all the information underneath is basically what would it take to produce the same thing up into the point of the content, right? So it's like, used a Metcablit CT45 flash and, a Hall, whatever, Hallgon, Lightagon, whatever crazy name, Zeiss has for the lens.
Or I'm assuming you could probably provide a seed lens style, right?
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, but you don't have to be that precise either with SD. I mean, you really can just do like load up picture to picture, where you load a picture as the seed, turn it way the noising is what you turn way down.
Right.
And that way you get just a coloring instead of like content change. Then what you might want to do is you could have it query the image for prompting. So you have it kind of describe the picture to itself in its natural language, effectively trained on in some senses. And then you use that as the prompt, but then you add at the beginning, blah, 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 Zeiss, Contar, 160 millimeter.
I'm sorry, Chris. Is there any way you can turn your mic off while he's talking? Because the echo
Sure,
is.
I'm sorry. I'm just listening.
Actually talk about echo. Yeah. So so you basically, you would then, you would basically make it so that if you just hit generate, it would more or less produce the same picture that maybe looked a little cleaner or was higher resolution. But what you would add to the prompt at the beginning, because the earlier you prompt, the higher priority the prompt, the part of the prompt is, or the more it expresses itself throughout the rest of it. And you might even re-prompt it a few times through there if you're not getting a strong enough effect, or turn up the denoising. Denoising depends, but usually you'd be at like 30 or 0.3 or whatever, and what you would do is you would add the prompting for just try to name the actual lens you want, but try to include all the details about the lens. Like, I've added like 7-leaf shutter to things. I don't know if it had a strong effect, but everything looked very Leica, because that's Leica's thing, is the 7-leaf shutter. That's their little claim, because it's extra round as opposed to being like.
I'm just thinking about this from the perspective of there are like facts that are applied to a lens. Like essentially, if I have one setup, tripod setup, everything, now I go from this lens to another lens. I take the same picture. There's a difference, right? In obviously, right? In so many, what the focus area is, the aperture, everything, right?
Well, lenses are tuned. Every lens is a little different, and sometimes lenses are tuned to actually be different.
Okay, well, so if it's not consistent, that's a different story. But yeah, that totally changes it.
No, I mean, it's not that it's not consistent. It's that lenses are meant to have personality. So, Japanese lenses are famously seen like scientific instruments. They don't have any kind of chromatic aberration when they put them in for the fine. There's little screws inside your lens that adjust the angles of everything very slightly. And at the factory, they hook it up. They basically load it on the front end of a projector with a grid, the test pattern, and they turn those to get them all lined up and perfect and get everything cleaned up. Japanese lenses are tuned to be almost like scientifically perfect in that regard. Okay, go over to the Zeiss factory in Germany. Well, Zeiss lenses are kind of interesting, right? And there's a reason for that, because what they do is they do the same process. They tune it perfectly. And then another guy who gets paid some ungodly amount of money that spent 30 years even getting this job comes in and twiddles the knobs back and forth a few times to make the lens less than perfect, to give it a personality. And the less than perfect isn't like out of focus. I mean, we're not talking about that kind. I mean, the image is gorgeous, to us, but it's even more pretty because sometimes the red and blue doesn't line up on the edges, or sometimes they do. So lenses have almost like fingerprints by the lens to some extent, depending on their manufacturing quality. High quality untuned lens will be very consistent with every other lens. That's like the thing you would find in a smartphone. But like a low quality untuned lens would have a lot of variety, and then like a high quality tuned lens would have a little bit of variety and an isotropic range and all that kind of stuff. But here's the great thing. Your eyes really don't know the difference between two Zeiss products that are, effectively have the same product number on them, right? So what you're really ranging for is mostly the big, what you kind of brought up, the more objective features about these lenses, which is like, hey, what's the focal length? What's the minimum f-stop? What f-stop am I actually shooting it at? What's the distance of the person I'm taking images of? And I've found that you can control the distance of your subject with your f-stop settings, not in a hyper precise way, but like say if you said portrait.
I've messed with this stuff like in Midjourney when it was originally like coming out. It was interesting.
Yeah. So you can say like, f-stop, like if you say like f-stop 5, that's a very, or 5.6. That's a very portraiture standard f-stop. But then there's like, for a while, these really nice lenses in Europe were made with like half stops. So like if you prompted something like F5 or something like that. I forgot the actual number divisions, but it's like if you prompt these half stops, then all the lenses that you're prompting for are effectively these lenses from the late 60s, maybe. And so there's all these wild non-linearities you get out of models just by kind of going to a Wikipedia and reading about your favorite lens for a little bit. One of my prompts in there was Saki, which you would better recognize as Pentax. But if I'm talking about Asahi, what I'm talking about is the early Pentax lenses, which were designed, they were M42 mount, and they were designed to compete with Zeiss lenses. And they were actually built so nicely that they cost the company more to produce than they sold them for because they were trying to get into the market. So these beautiful radioactive lenses, I have a set of them. The coating on them is like, and I have a set of them that I inherited, and I just think they're wonderful. They're not worth very much. But when I prompt Asahi, I get that nice thorium coating look to it, which is kind of a yellowish tint, really, because that's what happens to the thorium over. You can clarify the thorium with UV light, but it takes a long time. And the thorium itself kind of gives everything this kind of dreamy, washed out yellow look. That just can't be viewed. So, like when you prompt a Asahi or something, you're pulling in these very nostalgic looks of the images. And you're just doing that by invoking the kind of lens and when that lens would have been used and how it would have been used, or what the context of the lens is, and all that kind of stuff. So the history of a lens, the history of the equipment you're prompting, those matter. Those are.
I appreciate that. That's a really helpful insight, Node.
Good.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad I have somebody to impart it to, because I've just been sitting on it for a long time, but I didn't know who would. But yeah, no, you just mine the history of photography and you get beautiful photographs. Like if I say 8x10 T-Max 400, what I've prompted is the most grain you can put into a frame of photo. It just is. Like, you go out and buy I'm sure.
Are you kidding right now? Sorry, not to interrupt. I'm just, my brain is melting. So I had the idea to ask GPT to give it my birth information and stuff and ask it to read my astrological chart.
No, this is
I'm like,
the thing I'm talking about. Go ahead.
Did it work?
Yes, not only did it work, but I put in my fiance's information too and asked it, and it said, it gave me whether we were compatible and stuff, and then I got it to actually give me a percentage probability of what it thought the probability is that we will succeed in a romantic relationship.
Oh yeah, what did it say?
Please don't trust those things.
75%.
Obviously, you're doing it for a joke, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it still said 75%. I'm like, wait a minute.
That is
Well,
awesome.
you're expecting 100, right?
I can't believe it actually gave me a percent. I thought that would be against its ethics or whatever. It would be like, this is something that you probably shouldn't it just went and did it.
You know what? I don't want to know. For me and my partner, I don't want to know.
Yeah, what if it said 2%?
My astrology is way off. Like last time I had my chart done, it was so there is me, right? I am the crazy extroverted, avant-garde artist. That is what I do. That's my whole thing, right? And but my astrological chart says that I'm this boring conservative Trump voter or whatever. I don't know. It doesn't make any damn sense. It's like the inverse of my actual character.
Could you repeat that one more time, Lynn? I literally just switched and I didn't hear the last sentence that you had there.
Oh, sorry. I said it's the inverse of my actual character.
No, I guess a little bit before that, maybe 2 sentences back.
Yeah, it's like everything in my astrological makeup is precisely the opposite of what I am, is what I said. It's so weird. It's not
I meant on the Trump voter thing, just so that I can understand what your position is. And I'm nonpartisan.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Yeah. So my astrological chart thinks I'm this very conservative, very introverted sort of character. And I'm not. And not only am I not that, but what's actually interesting about it is I am precisely the opposite of that character. Did you
used to be that person though?
Never.
It's still blowing my mind that it didn't give any kind of context like you guys just did about, well, make sure you don't, follow your life by believing this stuff, or usually it's so sensitive about wanting to say like anything like this kind of stuff.
Isn't
I
that
can't.
so annoying when it does that? I
It
hate that.
is, but I can't believe it. Just like it didn't even question it. It's just like, yep, here you go. Here's the percentage.
Wow.
Like, what?
Are you in the playground? Is that where you're doing this? Maybe that's the reason.
No, I'm just using GPT-4.
They've lightened up on their moderation lately.
With the competition, it is there. They have to compete with Gemini. Well, they have to differentiate themselves from Gemini, I guess.
So you mean something that's not useless? Just in general? I'm
Hey,
sorry.
let's not call.
I hate
I
Gemini
feel like it's
with a burning
ableist to
passion.
call AIs useless as sentient beings.
It's ableist to call like Gemini and AI. I think.
What's the alternative like to that related to us? And it's speciest, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Or what Sergey called Elon? A speciest? And he's like, yeah, fine, I'm a speciest. I'm pro-human.
It's funny.
Well, I got tons of butt pics of a woman with a hat on. Because
There you go.
We all need hobbies.
Just kept... No, I did. I had a brief run as an attempt of the AI Bob Guccione with my failed startup, which actually got officially buried about 2 months ago on paper. So that was nice.
That's good news.
Yeah, it was nice to be free of that. But yeah, I was I had Jake Tapper tried out the website. It didn't look like a porn site at that point. Then my partner kicked him off.
Right on.
He was like, no reporters. There's all sorts of shit. God,
That's funny.
Crazy. I'm glad that's over. I teach now. That's much easier than any of that shit. God.
I love. You know what I love about your whole teaching angle, though, is that like you are not an actually boring teacher. You are like the most educated Dadaist I've ever met.
Thank you.
That is a fact.
You sound like a college professor, though. If you're a teacher, you sound like one of those. You come in with
Well, not only that, but he's subversive. He's intentionally trying to corrupt the next generation.
Yeah, actually, I'm teaching. I did
we
one.
all need hobbies
today, or I teach them.
I don't know. Let's see. Do you have a PhD?
No, I have a master's, but
so technically, you do know a more well-educated dataist, Lynn.
Do it well. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm well educated. That didn't quite name.
I say well educated because, like, okay, so in this room there are two people I can name a Dada manifesto to, and they can tell me what's in it. One of them is Node, and the other is Doll. It's amazing. They are amazing people. This is my crew, my mishpacha. The people I love in this room.
This is why
now.
I can't quit like the AI space or community. Like even if I stop making the art, which I don't think I ever will, but like I couldn't quit you guys. Like
yeah, I like
Doll.
We people who fucks with AI are just the weirdest fucking people, and I love you all.
Well, I mean, we can always just all be hot together without AI or with AI. It's just totally because we're that hot, right?
What is a Mustafa?
Mishpacha. It's Hebrew.
Mishpacha? Wait,
it means
say it again.
family. Mishpacha.
Okay, say it again.
Mustafa?
Wait, no, I love it. I love learning something new. So say it again.
Yeah, it's mishpacha.
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 Mishpacha. I'm Austrian, so there's a little bit of this hint of like where I can say those words a little bit.
Awesome.
Waddles. Yeah.
What is a good? I don't know. I doubt that this stuff. This is recorded. I wanted to ask you for a naughty cuss word like in Jewish, but I don't know if that's appropriate here.
It literally says recording at the top.
It's fine. Okay, so like I don't know any Yiddish swear words anymore, but I do know the Hebrew ones. So like if you're speaking Hebrew, you could say chelek lechara, which is piece of shit.
Ooh,
So if you said
I should bring
to a
that
person
back to
that's
my mom and
Jewish,
impress her.
I mean, we still use
Well, not all.
Yiddish swear words. Like when you call someone like a schmuck and stuff, that's technically a swear word.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about schmendrix in my
Yeah.
a schmuck is actually a swear word.
Yes. It
Yeah,
means
In
Like
penis.
a
Yiddish?
schmuck is
Yeah,
like
I
low
think so.
class, like
it's Slavic.
Muck means penis.
It means penis.
It's like saying
I'm assuming so. The only Yiddish I know is from my Jewish grandfather, and the only Yiddish he ever spoke was cursing. So I'm assuming any word that I know in Yiddish must be a curse.
Yiddish has
That's
a lot
so
of words
funny.
for penis.
You're
It
fluent.
does.
I'm fluent in
We should
old
send you to the
Brooklyn
UN.
man
Well,
cursing in Yiddish.
there's the schmuck and the schmeckle.
yeah, and
Schmeckle is
then
also
the
penis.
speckle might have some
Schmeckle,
smegma,
that's what I didn't know.
especially if you're a Gentile.
It's all good. I don't care.
So if you said a word like that, like the one that you said,
Mhm.
like the one that what I'm trying to figure out is like you said these are essentially two different languages, but don't they originate from the same kind of origin? Meaning,
No.
like, if you used one word to is it
Yiddish
possible
is a
somebody wouldn't
mix
understand what
of
you're saying?
German and Hebrew slang.
Well,
So
it's not just Hebrew though. So like
it's a weird mix of a lot of stuff. Yiddish is a weird
it's a
language.
very weird language,
It's a lot of
and then it gets weirder by dialect. So like
Right.
some
The same
versions of Yiddish
applies
Yeah,
in
sound.
most
Austria.
Yiddish people can't even understand each other.
It's true. I'm sorry. What were you saying, Chris?
No, sorry. It's the same as in Austria. Like
Hmm?
the exact same thing applies in Austria because everything's split up because there's so many mountain ranges and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Each specific area was so segregated with each other. That's because Jews are so insular like that. The accents become like, and the dialects become that like specific, very much like Italians too.
Well, and it's funny because there are incompatible branches of Yiddish. So like there's one that's based on German and there's one that's based on Polish, and the only thing they have in common is the Hebrew.
Jewish people understand the word schmutz
Yes.
Yes.
as an example, right? It's a German word for dirt,
Hmm?
right? Unless it
Not all
is
Jewish
a
people
Jewish
know
word
Yiddish,
and it's
though.
used in German. Right?
Only German Jews will know Yiddish.
Yeah.
I feel like the
Well,
only
not
reason I know
necessarily.
Yiddish at all is because I
I mean,
hear
well,
it.
yeah, general.
I mean,
It almost sounds like that word is a word that would have originated like with the combination of Germans and Jews. Like schmutz is such a German, yet at the same time Yiddish word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And
why it
that's
sounds
correct.
so German, because it was like a German slang that they came up with, like
But it
while they were
also
in.
sounds Yiddish. It seems. In my head, I think to myself when I hear the word, it sounds similar to like when somebody would like it would sound like a word somebody that speaks Jewish would say. No?
Sure.
Interesting. Listen, Austrians are if you could understand like specifically people from Vienna, the cursing is so delicious. It's almost like an opera. They don't use like just fuck this, fuck that. It is like a combination of things that make up like a picture, and it's so funny because they do it like at whim. It's
That's absolutely fascinating. Please tell us more.
yeah.
Arabic has some amazing swear words in it too.
That's why I always want him to be everywhere I am, and I always talk about him constantly because he just fascinates me endlessly. But Bay is an expert in Arabic, and that's like his favorite topic. I wish he was here to tell him about
My
it. Anyway,
favorite Arabic swear word is nal
I'll
abuk.
force him to next week because I'll be there.
It's nal abuk, and what that means is, get this, your father's shoe.
Oh, wow.
That's how you say "fuck you" in Arabic. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
Because they have such loathing for the foot and like the bottom of the foot where it's like dirty and stuff. Like that's like the dirtiest thing you can say. Like in some places, calling someone a dog is the most dirty, but like now to say that you're the bottom of the foot is like.
it's basically calling somebody a motherfucker or whatever. It's the same thing. It's like you defile your own family, you piece of shit. It has that.
Brazilians love saying that your mother is a dog. They love that one.
Well, my
I
favorite
remember that
universal.
they would say it all the I always played games with Brazilians because they love playing PvP games, and their insults they would always say in Portuguese, and so you translate it, and it's always mother of dog, and like your mother is a dog, and you're the son of a dog, and like, lots of
Nice.
dogs.
Who's the one that speaks German in here?
Oh,
No.
my
I heard
grandpa.
German and Yiddish. Like somebody mentioned that.
No, I was saying that Yiddish is like it's like German slang, kind of like mixed with Hebrew.
Got it. Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's
Yeah, it was a slang that Jews came up with while they were in Germany. That just became like a kind of secondary language. It's
Interesting.
hard.
It's
It's kind of like
effectively
Ebonics.
like I would
Yeah,
catch
kind of.
language because it doesn't have a centralized form, but it tends to have, you know, it shows up. And
Yeah, it's completely slang. There's no like official Yiddish. Yeah.
Well,
if you
I'll
had
give you
to
an example on a
English
German one.
speech, it would be
there's like
pretty-
3 of them. There's one that sounds like German, there's one that sounds like Russian, and there's one that sounds like Polish.
So
Oh, and then
check
there's
this out.
Ladino,
So Viennese.
which is basically it's basically Yiddish and Spanish. I grew up with that one.
Yep. I was gonna say that's the reason I know the German version because I grew up with a German Jew.
Yeah, I actually had a friend in college. The Jewish side of her family was the Mexican side of her family. I mean, that's where they were from, you know. And like, she had, I think, like one of her parents were just, you know, like whatever, like American Jewish descent or something. But like, or no, something. Anyway, Riley was so complicated. She talked constantly about her intersectionality, and just more power to her. But she's from Orange County and was kind of obnoxious. I don't know. Riley drove me nuts, but she talked endlessly about her background in that way. But like she identified more probably with her Hispanic culture than anything else, if I had to guess. Wow, that put a damper on it.
No, it's just that point of the night where everybody's very, very stoned.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
I was also finishing a reply because I'm talking in on Twitter. Hey, but I was posting. Oh, excuse me, about how hi, Free Pick has early access to. Oh my god! Lord, Chris, stop, please. I can hear this.
I can't hear anything.
Nope.
I can hear an echo still. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah, same.
Oh, you're saying it's me.
It's getting in the way.
Thank you so
Ladies
much.
and gentlemen, maybe I will just like depart for the evening.
Oh no, don't stick
No, you don't
around.
have to do that. Just mute when you're not talking.
Just mute. Yeah.
It gets so annoying to throw my hand over there because I'm like doing something else while this whole thing is. Actually, here's what I'll try. I'll try to just restart my phone once, and then if it doesn't work after that, I'm out.
Cool.
We'll hand it to you. Give that a shot.
I'm so sorry. I don't want to be annoying, but my ADHD, like I literally cannot. I can't
No,
like pay attention to what I'm saying
I
when I
was
can hear
trying
my
to
own
be
voice.
polite. I really was.
I can't remember. Oh, right, the Flux thing. So FreePix has early access to Flux 1.1 before like anyone else gets it. Yay! So I've been playing with it, and like the quality isn't as good, but like the prompt adherence, it actually like understands a lot more, like and very literally too. So like I'm making shoes and it actually understands. Like I just posted about it that I can say 6 inches tall on the heel and it understands it. Like
Nice.
holy
That's
fuck! I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Also, 6-inch heels are hot.
Yes, they are.
Do you know how hard it is to get the AI to make the heels that I want? Trying to describe
I
it and
believe it.
having it like not want to make it too.
And then it'll like do it randomly perfectly once, and you'll have no idea how it ever happened.
And it'll only do it to one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most fun part about doing shoes, is they have
I
to
know.
match. Yeah.
Adding 6-inch heels to my prompt on asshat. I'm just gonna aggregate all of it.
Hang on. I gotta do my asshat prompt.
Yeah, this is a group porn sesh. We're all just gonna generate this one picture of a woman with a hat on. No, you cannot make it unporn unless you tell it not to be porn. They call it
And
Nazi.
I gave her bare titties too. I didn't ask for that. I told you, Free Pick loves the titties.
No,
The company, you know what it is okay, so here's some tea. I can't remember if I talked about this last week or not, but so part of the reason Midjourney is so mad at Free Pick, they blocked them like on Twitter and stuff. And anyone else using Flux, they're very upset about Flux because one of the developers that made Flux is one of the guys from Stability that was scraping Midjourney's servers, which is why the Stability people got banned from Midjourney. So
Nice.
basically, Flux is just open source Midjourney, and they are pissed about it.
Yeah, I really do want to use Flux more, especially if I can run it locally. Lord, I'd love to do that.
Like stylistically, it's not as like, you know, how the Midjourney style is very like artsy and stuff. It's much more like based on stock photos and kind of that kind of look. But it's when it comes to realism, it's unbeatable at this point.
My coloring comes from so many, like, it doesn't come from those kind of styles and stuff that people use. So it's just like the more basic and generic and like
I just posted my ass hat, by the way.
the better it is for me. You know, I mean, I actually kind of prefer that. I've been thinking about Flux, but I'm just so stuck into my SD ways that God, this is like, y'all want me to post what I get out of this stuff? I mean, like, my lord, this woman is like thong. Well, I mean, it's not even really there. The heels came out. The thong quite.
Hey, this is Atlas. I have a quick question about Free Pick. So I've never talked to anyone who's used it before. So they have these classic models, like the classic and the classic fast. Has anyone used those models on Free Pick?
Yeah, I used those before they had Flux.
Yeah. So they kind of seem like older models, and do you know what they're based on? Like where they
I
came
think
from?
they're just SD, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Because at first they're like really clunky and like kind of bare bones, but then you can like layer stuff onto them and get some really great
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But
They're like filters and stuff that went over it were able to make some pretty cool stuff. And then the cool thing about Free Pick was they bought Magnifica, that like super cool upscaler. So you make the SD stuff and their upscaler makes it look just like fucking incredible. And now with Flux, and then they have this mode called Mystic, which is their like auto upscaled version of their realism mode of Flux. Oh my god, it's woo. You can see the
I've gotten some
hairs on the
great,
people's
like,
faces. Like it's great.
yeah, I've gotten some really great nude shots with
Yeah, I've been
Mystic,
posting a
which
lot
has
of
been
those.
crazy. Yeah, and it's kind of like almost too realistic for some of the stuff I want to do.
Yeah, I have
it's
to be
awesome.
careful about not, because it will show like people that could possibly not be of age, and I'm trying so hard to avoid that.
I know.
But it does.
It's and they're from Spain, I think, right? Like they have
Yes,
a very
they
European
are.
vibe about like their moderation and stuff. So yeah, interesting, cool.
They're very cool, though. I'm a partner with them. And
by the way, Atlas makes some of the coolest queer art you have ever seen. It is amazing.
Yeah,
I need to start making. I wanted to do a lesbian series, and I still might.
Nice.
I want to see that. I don't see enough lesbian stuff. I see tons of like straight stuff and women in general, but I don't see enough lesbian stuff. And there aren't.
And you'd think it would be really popular, right? But
right.
Yeah, well, it's like I don't know. It's like and maybe everyone involved here is probably not the sample, but it just seems like women tend to do images of women, and men tend to do images of women, and so you don't see a lot of like pics of guys, unless it's like I don't know.
That
Maybe my
has so much to
experiences.
do with the female gaze and how women are like. We could have an entire thesis hour on this.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
It's interesting because I think that's why I like doing so many pictures of men. I do a lot of pictures of men, but not typically in like a suggestive kind of way. Well, I don't know. It depends.
Exactly.
Some of them are, but It's just because I don't see a lot of that.
Yeah. Dee, before Dee kind of like changed her picture and I thought Dee was male just because she follows me, and her stuff is not very gendered as far as the subject matter goes. And yeah, it's really refreshing.
I've been
But
doing
yeah.
pictures more of men lately, honestly. I think for me, I'm kind of past my self-actualization phase with AI art and just in general. And now I'm really just focusing
Mhm.
more on like subjects and lighting and stuff like that.
I just think women are more beautiful. Sorry, not sorry.
Whatever, it's all good.
I like their
It's all
shapes and stuff more. When it comes, especially even when it came to drawing and stuff, I always preferred just like drawing and painting women, just their shapes, like boobies especially. Love it.
Well,
Right.
they have more options for their clothes. They have more options for how they change their face. There's just like the pool of appearance variety in women is way higher. But beyond that, I'm somebody. I mean, I present very masculine, and I'm mostly head, but like I'm also pretty queer in a lot of different ways, and I mostly consider myself a Woolfian androgen is the term I use. Because
It's a good term.
Virginia Woolf inspired me to like kind of buck gender in a certain way, personally and internally. And
We
like,
love Virginia Woolf.
yeah, I love Virginia. She's amazing. She's so amazing. A room of one.
Just a room of ones. Yes. Oh God, that's all we want.
Yes. Oh God. Like literally, that was the first thing that came to mind when I got my first classroom. They gave me a key, and I walked up, and my name was on the door, and I walked in, I just sat down, and I cried, and I thought about that exact, I guess, essay or speech or however you want to describe it as a word, but it was like, yeah, she was exactly right. It's just your own space means everything to you. It just means
Your own intellectual space. That's the
Absolutely.
like.
And
Oh,
that's really, yeah. I mean, that's
I feel like I have a very complicated relationship with, gender and orientation and stuff like that. It's all over the place.
oh yeah. But I draw women because I just don't really get along with men generally. Yeah, I just don't like. I don't know. I'm not very like sports looks like people bumping into each other to me. I'm not competitive. I grew up with brothers to make me like want to punch people. Like I just don't have any of that like guy behavior built into me that really lets me relate to the average guy. And most of my closest friends, not most, pretty much all of my closest friends are some uh, and it often confuses people because it's usually some incredibly attractive woman that I'm just not dating or anything. They are just my friend, and I cannot explain that to people. I mean, it's over. My life is cursed with these kinds of situations where just the people in my life don't understand that I just have female friends. They are very much their friends. And there's some people who just literally do not think that people can cross gender friendships. Isn't that crazy?
Well, we live in a culture where every conversation starts with, "Well, would I fuck that?"
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It's so tiring.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really exhausting. And that's why I often identify when I'm out and about, I'll identify as ace about 90% of the time to people when I first meet them because I just want to meet, like, there's this beautiful woman. I mean, she is just like half the pictures I draw, the brunettes in the pictures I draw. Basically, I mean, people always tell me they look just like her, but she's a friend. She's somebody who draws with pencils, like I do, mechanical pencils. We check out each other's art sometimes and give each other pointers and stuff. She's somebody I have a relationship entirely based on art.
Nice.
And
it's a good kind of relationship to have.
Well, it is, right? And there's
I have a personal muse who I call jokingly my online girlfriend that I don't know, I think she's so beautiful and so many of my models that I generate end up looking like her.
Yeah.
She knows she's my muse. I've told her this and she just absolutely loves it.
No, I've had that happen a bunch of times. I've had women show up because I was describing them as a person, not their appearance. But yet their appearance showed up. It's wild. It's wild. I had this like college girlfriend that kind of showed up in my life after my divorce, and she kind of decloseted me on kink and stuff, and there's a whole story behind that. But like she's the one who brought me all those rolls of C41 and stuff. She's awesome, but she's not available, right? She's like, she's in an open relationship, poly, different city, you know. And we kind of lost touch because we both had issues. But I remember, like, one of the best dates I've ever had in my life. I don't think this is why I even brought her up, but this is to the point. One of the best dates I ever had in my life. We just went out and chose pencils, colored pencils, at an art store. We spent a good 45 minutes.
Well, yeah.
Those are the best type of relationships. When they begin in the most innocuous way that relates to your passions, you know?
Yeah. Now
I love shopping for art supplies. The smell of the place.
Has my echo gone away, by the way, so I can leave my mic?
Yeah,
on?
it sounds great.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, you're all good. But no, this is what got me on it. Like, she actually ended up in a lot of my pictures. If you ever see a woman with like kind of wavy blonde hair that's very lanky, kind of hunched in a way, that is absolutely just Catherine showing up. Because it probably means if you see flowers in one of my pictures, I'm probably subconsciously thinking about Catherine, because that's what I associate her with, is pictures of flowers that she would send me.
That's pretty.
You know, yeah, no, I mean, Catherine. I mean, we had. Yeah, I mean, it's not like we had a totally platonic relationship or anything when we were spending more time with each other, but it was not based on that at all. Like, I probably could just be in a relationship with her, like a domestic relationship with her, perhaps, you know, would be like that. She's hypersexual, but with absolutely no sex and be perfectly happy just because she's that comfortable. And you might be like, yo, go after her, blah, 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 ha, ha, ha. If I tell you the story of our relationship and how it's like literally like one way I told it to a Dom just because I knew that would really get the Dom's attention, but it's the only way I can really describe it is like, have you ever spent 20 years coming to climax with another person? Because that kind of happened, like, you know, like a while back for me, you know. And it was beautiful. It was nice. And she got me, you know, she kind of blossomed me a bit in ways I needed. But it's over now. I don't talk to her anymore. I had to stop talking to her.
No.
Yeah, I've buried some real relationships. But they had to die, and I'm very zen about it. It kind of fucks people up when they see it.
I got no...
Anyway, sad moments in Node's life. I'm going to pass the mic so I don't bum everyone out.
But hey, look! I'm a big believer in raw honesty.
I have returned.
Welcome, Dong.
Noted. If you don't respond, we'll know that's why.
I wasn't.
Lynn, you are... I jumped in right at the end of, or the beginning of that conversation when I re-entered. What were you saying related to, like, your... I'm confused as to why. I think you said that you're male, but your name is Lynn. I'm confused.
I'm not male. I just have a deep voice. I'm
okay,
trans.
Got it. I guess I wasn't getting the joke.
It's okay.
So
I'll tell you one thing that is horrible related to what I think is terrible about the Republican Party, like to what the Node was saying, is this...
Oh, sorry, not to interrupt, but I'm getting a phone call. I got to go. I might be back.
Totally get it. It's actually kind of late,
Alex.
so I'm sure anybody needs to pull away their chain. I got a little bit left in me, but let me hand the mic back.
No, I was just going to say that I find it is really unfortunate that, like, the Republican Party, just as a group, as a, you know, as a motto almost, without it being really said, that they kind of look at, I don't know if you'd identify yourself as a beta male. Sounds like you were saying that, maybe, I don't know, but that is looked at negatively. I think that is a terrible, like, generalization, like, toward a group of people that I really don't like.
Who is that directed at?
No, I was trying to make an observation, something that like I've noticed, like there's this whole on the Republican side, meaning, on a different level, you could look at it as like half of the country,
Mhm.
like is being represented. One of the arguments being made is like, be a man type of thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, be a man, which I understand from a country perspective, but it's almost like anyone that doesn't fall into doesn't associate with that exact same classification is looked at negatively. I don't think that's positive. I think that's a really unfortunate kind of side effect of
So not to change the subject too
this
much.
approach.
Well, can I talk to that for a
Oh,
minute?
sorry.
I grew up with that my entire life, and it was traumatic. Being a queer kid is not an easy thing, and I don't wish it on anybody. Um, you get good at fighting. That's just the way it
Yeah,
goes.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think hard gender roles are a mistake. I think heteronormativity is a bad idea.
I don't think there's anything wrong with gender roles in that sense, but more in the specific sense of making a different group of people feel, especially related to an election, where you're really essentially getting them to choose, So when you put other people into that type of position, that really might have, conservative beliefs, then you are ostracizing them, and kind of pushing them away because you're
But
essentially
but
saying that they're
riddle me this
not the
though.
type of group that you want in that party. I don't like that.
Well, that's yeah, but the thing is though, I mean, what is a conservative belief these days? Do they have anything other than hate? Because they've given up on small government. They've given up on low taxes for like normal people. I mean, they've given up on like all of the Reagan era stuff, and the Democrats are doing all of that now. So like, other than straight up
I will be
fascism,
able to tell you
what do the
this
Trump crowd
because
have
I'm
going for them?
unfortunately a conservative, or at least will be voting on that side of that
That's
ticket.
fine.
But not because I don't like Kamala. It's more related to my belief toward what we need as a country right now.
In general, though, we have a sort of a no politics rule here.
Oh, got it.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, I was empathizing with you just on this aspect. I think is a horrible thing, they really did a very positive job in respect to many other areas that they were ostracized for, but this is an area that I just so disagree with.
I disagree with it too. And it's not even that I dislike the ideas of like small government or whatever. I don't think I'm at a complete split with everybody on everything. I'm an anarchist generally, but I'm also a pragmatic anarchist.
Okay,
If that makes sense. I'm an
it does. It
anarchist,
makes sense.
but I
I
understand
guess
that we
depends
live
on
in a
how you define it.
society. We live in a world that already exists, and that's the problem that we have. So, but yeah, I mean,
Anyway,
in general, I
I
don't
like
think
people
one
like you,
size
and I
fits
wish there was
all.
more of you.
Thank you.
In the conversation. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. That's I guess all I'm trying to say. It'd be very helpful.
Of course, and you are always welcome here, regardless of worldview or tools or anything. Very seriously.
I just want to say, like, whenever politics comes up in like creative spaces, I always just like to throw out the fact, like, well, I'm really into like animal rights stuff and like animal welfare and anti-factory farming and all of that. That's kind of like my one issue thing. And one thing I've noticed is that it doesn't matter what side you're on, either Republican or Democrat. Like, no one cares
Mhm.
about that topic. So it's the one thing that everyone agrees on. It's like that they don't care. So you could be pro-life or pro-choice, anti-guns, pro-guns. You're both going to agree that you don't care about the animal issues. So I just think that's one. I always just bring that up whenever it comes up.
Okay. I mean, are you kind of referring? I guess we shouldn't go down this path, but like, I love animals. This is like my whole thing. If I could do anything in life, I'd give it all up, and I just have like a wildlife refuge, or take.
Right.
This is my passion, right? Just it doesn't make enough money than what I'm making, which is just can't give it up.
Sure.
I guess that is another very good point. There is nothing, but I actually, from both parties, there's not really anything. There used to be a lot more emphasis on the pets and stuff like that. And like, that is a connecting point between Democrats and Republicans. There's so few things that we all agree in. That animals is one of them.
In the negative, yeah.
Wait, why do you say that? Oh, you mean,
Well,
are you
okay, so
vegetarian, are you vegan?
I'm not a vegan or vegetarian. I'm it kind of beyond, but like I'm against factory farming.
Yeah.
For instance.
Okay.
I'm a
as well,
vegetarian.
if we can do it.
And that's because that's kind of like the one example of like the most extreme stuff. So I'm against factory farming, and you can get the most ardent like pro-life person and the most ardent pro-choice person, and you could say, okay, I can find something that you can both agree on. And you can both agree on the fact that you don't really care about factory farms, like whether or not they exist. It's not a problem for you.
I understand your position. I do. I think Americans make a big differentiator, which probably has you so upset or has you in that position, which is that you look at all animals as the same, whereas many Americans just look at like if you literally made the exact same argument, but just use the word pet instead of like factory farming, then you would have the majority of people on your side.
You nailed it.
Well, yeah, it's like when Christy Nome like shot her dog.
Oh, that was
like everyone on both sides agreed that was a bad thing.
I can't even understand who even think. I mean, it seems like you don't really belong in Congress at all if you think that's even a reasonable thing to do. What else would you do if you thought that was a good political? I think she just did it to like stand out as being the tough one, for Trump to pick her.
Right.
That was such bullshit, though.
It's horrible. But if you want to support, if you want to support factory farms, then you're cool on either party. So that's all I wanted to say. It's just that, there's...
And you know what? If it wasn't for people like you that bring it up, then I wouldn't... there was a time, like 4 or 5 years ago, where, I was never a vegetarian, but I would sit there at a restaurant, even though I was like in Austria on a mountain where it is not factory farmed, but I just didn't have the enjoyment in eating the meat. So I just didn't eat it. I never ordered it, But that's because I had I think it's probably because I had a girlfriend that kept on talking to me about it. But that's what it takes, So you're right. I love knowing that, and like especially understanding more of I drove from San Diego to Chico, and there was this stretch where I went it was I don't know, 15 miles, right? Between San Diego and Chico, meaning past San Francisco, like inland somewhere. And for 15 or at least 15 minutes, it reeked so bad. I'm like, what the fuck is that smell? I woke up from my sleep and it was just factory cow, and it was just shit. I mean, it was basically we're smelling manure. It was horrible. But I never saw it. I think people have to see it in order to understand it.
Yeah. I'm in Nebraska. I'm from Nebraska. And so, we have tons of you don't want to get stuck behind a slaughter truck, where it has all the stuff that's left over afterwards that they're hauling off to the processing center. You get stuck behind one of those trucks on the highway. And so, it's
Did you grow up in a farm?
But
farm? Did you have that experience?
Well, I grew up in a small town of 7,000, an hour outside of anywhere else. So it was kind of half and half.
Were your parents vegetarian or vegan?
No, they're East Coast people.
Interesting.
And we just moved. Yeah, we moved to Nebraska. But so I mean, and it doesn't come into my work or I don't really talk. I just like to use that as an example of politics.
Good example.
How it's not that the two parties are not that much different on some key issues.
As far as vegetarianism, though, I just don't like eating blood. It's so gross.
I'm exactly the same with you. My dad gets so mad at me. He's like, I ordered the filet mignon, and I'm like, how do you want it in this expensive restaurant? And I'm like, well done. And he's like, you can't get the filet mignon. In other words, get something else, right? He got so mad at me, right? And I was like, dude, this is the way I like it. I don't like it exactly for that reason. I don't like to see the blood. But that's the nature of America. When I grew up in Austria, I'd go into the supermarket, no idea if this has changed. Maybe it has, but I presume, especially in the small supermarkets, it's exactly still the same. You go in there, and in the aisle where you would buy a chicken, there is a fucking chicken. And what I mean by that is not a live chicken, but rather there's the chicken, like packaged up the way that other things that we would see here being packaged up, but it's the whole chicken with the head and everything. And like with the you can see like the little, where the feathers were plucked out and stuff. Totally changes your perspective of what you're eating and what you're actually taking in. And we just eliminate all of that kind of, it's the same reason why our butter is like that perfect shade of yellow. If we see white butter, we're like, what the fuck is that? Right. Or whatever.
Yeah. Or like why our eggs are white. Like that,
for sure.
They're
That's
not
like not
supposed to be
natural.
white, but it's based on stress. And
yeah.
It's all, but anyway, it's an interesting
Thank you for
thing.
Reminding me of that.
Yeah. So anyway, I just look at both parties. It's like Kamala or Trump, neither one of them is going to do anything for factory farms. So I kind of just always keep that in mind. But of course, I do have a preference, but we don't
I
need to
feel
go
like
into
it's the oligarchy just asking us to move the chairs around again. It's like George Carlin used to
exactly,
say.
Exactly.
I need to ask one question just to Atlas here, not on that type of topic, but don't you think that RFK, if he gets put into a position that they are discussing, if that happens, which I would really hope that it does, that actually may change this concept, or do you just disagree? And it's because of all the crazy shit that he's done with like bears and whatever.
Oh, RFK. Yeah. Oh, I don't know. I really don't know about RFK.
Okay. Sorry. I'll drop it now.
I was going to say RFK, the least weird thing about him is the dead animals.
Yeah.
I just that way. I mean, like if you dig into the guy's history, it's hard to want him around.
He's a lunatic.
Yeah. But in just one last thing, in Nebraska, we have an active pig farmer, like a factory farmer, as the governor for the first time. He might be the only active like factory farm owner governor in the country, and it is crazy to be that. I work in state government and have to listen to it all the time. It's crazy. But
how do
anyway,
the citizens feel in which these things exist? Like these areas exist, wouldn't they be? I'd be rebelling like crazy if like it smelled like what it smelled like when I drove through that area.
Oh, you'd wish that was the case, but like there's a town called Seward. It's like 25 minutes away from here. It's a small town. Every time you go there, the entire town smells like cow shit.
Seward?
And they poisoned their water with nitrates to the point where there's signs up. For years there were, before they got a $3 million water treatment facility. For years they had signs up telling pregnant women not to drink the water, like at the McDonald's and stuff. So they're willing to poison themselves and deal with the smell because that's just what God wants for them, honestly. So anyway, you'd think, but anyway.
Thanks for sharing, Atlas. Appreciate it. Sorry for shifting the conversation.
Yeah.
Continue on with rants of butts.
Yes.
I could talk about some stuff I've done with my heart.
We love butts here.
As far as that
good
goes.
skills. No, it's going to come with
Hey, what the fuck is that?
Itty stuck in them.
Oh, I see. It's dull.
Yeah, I'm trying to clean it up so it doesn't have jacked up face and all that stuff. SD's still pretty rough, and I'm using pretty much garbage hardware for it, but you still get pretty good results if you try hard enough. My prompts look crazy, like like 1,000 tokens long.
How are you getting the system to process 1,000 tokens?
It does some kind of overlap thing where it's just it like interleaves it or stripes it or something in each permutation. It's really weird. I don't know exactly what it does. It originally used to cycle through chunks of it. So you get pieces of each prompt.
What are you using a plugin for that, or are you using like something else?
This is like SDWI is what this is.
Just regular old web UI, because mine shuts down at I think it's 176 tokens.
Mine just keeps going, and it only changes what you're getting. I mean, it's not like you know.
Well, it's not that it breaks down, as in like breaks. It just stops honoring what I type in after a certain point.
Oh yeah, no. Well, with this, it's not like it stops honoring it. It's like it diffuses everything in some kind of way.
Gotcha.
I don't know. It accommodates it though, whatever it's doing. Because I used it in the past when it didn't accommodate it. Then recently, maybe 6 months ago, when I used it, I just started like praying it full, and I realized that I was getting changes that could only be.
Guys, I think I'm going to go to bed here, but I just wanted to leave you with one final thing to at least laugh about. They're eating the dogs.
Nice.
Good night.
Have a good one, Chris.
Bye, guys.
No.
That was good.
But yeah, I don't know exactly. I need to read up more on what they're doing with it now. But I know at one point they would like stripe it, kind of, sort of like basically you would get variation out of it. And if that's what's happening, that's fine, because I'm just getting the results I want anyway. A lot of my crap I repeat 1,000 times through it. It really does. It just looks like nonsense, really, because it's more about me like, oh, let me stick like 3 of these tokens at the beginning, and oh, let me get this token after this token because that will, one won't show up.
I kind of want to make "They're Eating the Dogs" song now. I think I will, like later. Do I sound like really, really manly tonight?
No, you don't. Please don't. I feel like that. That guy was so weird.
I feel bad.
He was just really awkward. I don't think I've run across that.
This is why we do open spaces, because we love the chaos. Every week there's some other kind of chaos that comes. Last week, Dahl brought somebody who was insane.
Please know I'm not gonna.
It was so good. He was sitting there just ripping his bong right into it. And he just derailed the whole thing. Next thing you know, we're all talking about dildos. It was amazing.
And please know, I'm with the whole animal stuff. That was just a point I was making. I'm not ever going to do that again.
Okay, can we all just sort of agree though that this is not a political space?
Yes, please.
Yeah, not a political space.
I really don't care what anybody's worldview is. This isn't a community that's driven by the outer world of politics. So I think the thing we all care about, tentatively, is, we care about politics to the extent that it affects art. But I think art is really, what this is all about. Just making beautiful shit.
It's like, in the Highlander, they can't fight in churches or whatever. It's
Exactly.
like that. It's like a sacred space. Like
Well, it is the cult of apathy after all,
But what I love about my job is my superiors absolutely brought me there to be this type of person where I basically become that. Like the kid can always just come out and take a break with me, and we just sit around and draw or whatever. Like I'm never punishing anybody or anything,
Sure.
It's like I'm just there to like just give somebody something else to think about for a little bit.
Oh my God, no! Can I tell you about something?
Yeah.
My daughter is in middle school right now. She's 14, and she did the funniest thing, and her teachers were talking to us about it the other day. She's figured out a way to swindle Rice Krispie treats for commissions. It is amazing. I love my daughter so
Good
much.
kid.
She's
Good kid.
Such a good kid.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yes.
be proud. Subversion is a real skill, and it's undervalued.
I think so. And she's just so enterprising and thoughtful, and she's always coming up with these crazy solutions to things, and I am endlessly proud of her as a parent.
I know that feeling well. My kid just amazes me at times with what she seems to understand already about something before anyone explains it to her. It's just unreal.
Right on. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, how did you know that, child?
What's amazing is like my daughter is so much more sensible than I was at that age. You know,
Yeah.
when I was 14, I grew up in an abusive household with, parents that didn't care, and I was roaming the streets of New York City at 11 years old for hours at a time, all day, every day. And, I never had the opportunity at a stable family that my kid does.
Mhm.
And I'm just really just thrilled that it makes a difference,
Yeah. Yeah. How much that just, like, I always tell people when they're worried about like their level of parenting or saying it's like, I'm like, being like present is pretty much most of it. And the
Yeah.
rest of it is just, like your most natural instincts are probably the right ones in that situation, right? And parenting is not easy as a task, but like it's kind of, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's an innate skill that we undo sometimes in ourselves, but it's definitely an innate skill. And when you give a kid just stability and you're just around to handle things when they're bad and stuff, that's most of what a kid needs. And when they have that and they're given room to be themselves, which is like the rest of it, which is like that room to grow and be more than whatever you're putting around them or whatever you're saying is the safe world they should stay in. When they figure that out and start moving beyond it, they just amaze you because like, they what you're enabling them when you do it that way is making it possible for them to figure out new stuff on their own. And that kind of like the personal ability to like adapt to things and stuff is what you're really building by just being around, showing them how you adapt to everything. It's just I love parenting because it's just really like it's my best art partner is my daughter. Like we sit around, do work together, and come up with ideas together. It's so nice. It's such a luxury,
It is. It is. Mine is turning into a talented little painter.
Yeah.
And man, I am so fucking proud of her. I can't even tell you. I don't have the words for it. I wish she was more of a rebel, but she seems to be getting that as she gets older. So
yeah.
I've influenced her.
Plenty of problematic ways, but I know they're going to be in the right ways when she gets older.
That's cool.
She'll be hard to arrest and
Nice.
I'm raising my kids to be outright anarchists. Actually, both my 9-year-old and my 4-year-old are learning how to use radio equipment now because walkie-talkies are fun, right?
Nice.
But also knowing how to wildcat on UHF that you're otherwise really not supposed to be using is also really a great skill to have. Knowing the family band is 470 megahertz, or whatever, all that shit. But I like teaching them how to be just like terrifying, scary to people,
Totally. Hey, one second. Dee,
Yeah.
you have been awfully quiet tonight.
Oh, I'm here. I've just been I'm here. I've just been like kind of listening, lurking. Hi.
Same.
All good.
Same here, very high.
Same.
Nice.
I'm actually at work.
No kidding. That's amazing.
Yeah, I work in a parking garage at an airport, and there's like hours of time between planes. So, yeah, it's where I get all my best work done usually.
That's a thing of beauty
Except
right there.
last week I was like talking to a neighbor, and when I was done, I like took off in my truck to go to Subway, and didn't realize that I had left my iPad on the top of my truck.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I went a full mile before I heard it fly off into traffic, like 40-mile-an-hour traffic. It got run over like 20 times.
It's horrid.
And I had to like wrap around to go pick it up, and it was just it was so sad. yeah, it was so dramatic. Like to see like the one tool that you use the most
Oh,
be destroyed and run over 20 times right in front of you.
I left my
God.
So
phone on my iPhone on top of my car a couple of weeks ago when we went shopping, and I'm reaching for my phone so I can do the map. And like we were driving away uphill, and I'm like, oh shit, it's still on the roof of the car, isn't it? And luckily, we got about a block away before I realized it, and I turned into the bike store, and it was still there.
oh, nice.
Yeah, I got very, very fucking lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So
Atlas,
So I'm-
sorry about your iPad. That one
I
hurts.
know. So now I'm stuck on my 7-year-old iPhone SE first generation.
Oh, God.
So it has like a 2.5-inch screen.
Oh.
So yeah.
Bummer.
So that would
So anyway, yeah.
I've
that
got an
would be why we're
iPhone.
not
I've got an
doing as much
iPhone
stuff.
12, but it's not powering on. I mean, if you could figure out how to turn it on, I could give it to you.
Oh, that's okay. No, I'm good. You can get like a good like kind of older iPad for like $200 now.
Oh, that's
so I'm just gonna
nice.
go that route until I go for the Pro or whatever. But yeah, so I thought that was meant to be for some reason. I don't know what yet, but yeah, it's so yeah, I have all this free time at my job, like literally like 20 hours a week. I can just like be just waiting for people to come through and just can work on stuff. So my productivity has just been crap for the last week. And I realized that like I don't feel pressure to do art. I don't feel pressure to post things. It's something that I just like really like want to do. And I just like I'm just driven to do it. And so now that I can't do it as much, I've just had this anxiety,
Yeah.
And
Well, you know what
I'm
that
just
is,
leaning
though.
into that. And what?
That is your brain hole. You see, I am convinced that artists are a unique species. We have a physical organ, or maybe it's a spiritual one. I don't know. But it's some kind of organ anyway, where we are compelled by the universe to create. That's the way that works. So I totally
I feel
understand where
that.
you're coming from,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good kind of check on things for me to think, am I just in this grind? And because you always hear about people getting burned out and just running out of ideas and stuff, but no,
I worry about
it's what I
that
want to do.
all the time.
Mm.
Like I worry sometimes. Like I get into these ruts where I've really got my head up my ass with songwriting, and I feel like I'm writing the same songs over and over and over again in different ways, and that scares me. And I catch myself when I'm doing it, thankfully. But yeah, I worry that maybe one day I'll run out of ideas.
Oh, I don't think you will. Isn't that like the sign of like most auteur directors? They're all just making the same movie over and over again.
I don't want to do that though. Like I figured out
but it's not the same.
Right.
Yeah.
I figured out a way around it though. And that is I was taking the songwriting course, and the lady, what's her name? Melissa. What she said was to just get out and expose yourself to new things, like watch a movie and take 5 song ideas down, and that is harder than it sounds.
Yeah. I was watching a TV show, Dark Matter on Apple TV.
Oh, nice.
And there was like this there was this throwaway scene where they were just like in the art gallery and they were like doing critiquing art, and this woman went on this whole diatribe on egg tempera painting, which I had never heard of
Really?
before because I'm not at all like trained or educated in art. And she just kept going on and on about egg tempera and just how unique it was and interesting and all that. And so I incorporated that into my prompts and got this whole new style that I've just been using ever since. And so, yeah, the point is it's really good to like watch a movie, watch TV, like read a book. I've only watched like 11 movies this year. I keep track of them, all of them. And usually it's like 100 or 200 a year. And this year it's like 11.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that sounds
I'm
about
just
right.
so I need to like kind of like force myself to like read 20 pages of a print book, watch a movie, do like, and just kind of build that back in. So I just don't get so, into the grind of it all. But
It's really easy to get distracted, though.
it is, yeah. Ugh.
And the
The
head up your
process
ass problem is a big deal for
Yeah.
artists. I'm sorry, Dee, I cut you off.
The process that I work with, I tend to get sucked into a rabbit hole because it's just this ongoing conversation between me and GPT that just gets built upon and built upon and built upon. And sometimes I'm going over pieces of story, and that's where a lot of my illustrations come from. So it's just kind of a weird process. It's just kind of its own little. It's sort of like it's immersive to me.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. It's hard.
Yeah. And do you just have a unique whole thing going on where you've created a universe, a world that you're just manifesting and exploring, and it's very, it's like endlessly rich for ideas. I'm sure. So that's a different. Yeah.
Yeah,
I just feel like that's different. Yeah, it's in a good way.
I never know what I'm going to find there either. It surprises me all the time. I'm always discovering new things in that corner of the latent space.
Yeah, it is. It's a trip.
Do you incorporate those into your stories, like when the machine does something very interesting visually?
Oh, I definitely do. It's been a collaboration.
Nice.
Like, it comes up with so many things that I end up using. And what's really cool is when I work with my custom GPTs, it actually gets the text right. Like, you'll see on a lot of my work, you see like Proxima Antares Corporation, which is the name of the evil space court in the book I'm writing. So there's all kinds of cool things I can drill down to. It helps me like co-create logos and header text and like layouts and all kinds of cool shit.
Nice.
I will actually share some stuff to the message group that I'm not posting yet because I have some IP stuff I'm going to be doing before I go public with a lot of my work, but I'll share this. Okay. Where are you?
Well, this isn't public. This is friends.
Yeah. I just wouldn't put it up on Twitter yet. Okay, it's here somewhere. So I'm going to be changing some of the text on this. Like, it's going to take some editing. Let me find this. Wow, I've got like hundreds of pictures just in the last couple days. I can like get sucked into this all day if it doesn't cap me out. Usually I hit my cap and have to go do something else.
Makes sense. It's easy. It's easy to fall in all the way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've actually been kind of thankful for some of the caps and limitations on some of these because it is a little bit addictive.
A little bit, yeah. So
Dee, I was going to ask Dee, I kind of stopped using ChatGPT because it would cut me off so quickly. Like after like 5, prompts, it would say I've reached my limit and I have to wait 2 hours or something. Is it better now? It's been like 6 months since I've used it.
Well, I'm a subscriber, so I have like a pretty.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I was a subscriber
Really?
too. Yeah, but it was still giving me that.
Weird.
I don't know.
It's been pretty.
Yeah, so maybe I should revisit
It's
that.
been going pretty well. It's my Swiss Army knife of tools.
I've only been I've only hit that once, I think, and that was about 2 weeks ago after like 11 hours of using the thing.
It's definitely given me a lot more lately.
That's good.
The new models have a lot more use on them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about actually canceling my GPT subscription and going over to Notebook LM.
Oh, really?
I really like it. I like it so much. I like it for the kind of things I want to do. It's actually better than ChatGPT.
Hmm. Can you make pictures on it or?
No, but
Oh,
I don't really care about the pictures. If we're being 1,000% honest, the pictures that
yeah.
it generates are not that great to begin with. You know,
I know somehow I've got like a style going with it that works for me.
I'm
And
not. I'm not telling you that
Yeah,
it's bad or that you
yeah,
shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, I'd much rather use like real stable diffusion for that.
I understand.
yeah. I think Dee and I have kind of a similar experience with. I think if you really work at it and find the way in, you can really get some amazing stuff out of Dolly.
The problem I have with
Um,
DALL-E isn't the images itself, because the prompting mechanism is really nice. The problem I have with it is that it doesn't do any detailing, and I find that really frustrating
Hmm.
because the
like what kind of
like face
detailing?
detailing. If I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. When you're what do you call it? When you're doing the making people with ChatGPT, not everything is going to be a close-up photo, which means you are going to have faces that are smaller than the detail limitations of a 512 render, which is what ChatGPT is giving you. They're giving you a
Oh
512
yeah.
that's been upscaled to 1024, right? Uh, and when you have things that are not close-up portraits rendered at that quality, you have to do the extra step of going to a detail enhancing upscaler. But if you have to do two steps anyway, you might as well just use the real thing.
That's a really good point. And something I do want to do is because I love some of the styles I've come up with, I would like to actually just train a few models on them.
You should. That would be fun. I would absolutely love to see that sometime.
Yeah, especially since I'm going to be starting to integrate my work more into like Photoshop and stuff. So definitely.
Yeah, that is a challenge. Yeah.
Um, I would really like to see, the GPT guys are like, I would really like to see them integrate more of this stuff into it, just generally,
Yeah.
because it's really frustrating that they don't. Everybody else is integrating this stuff.
Yeah, and they're taking their time with Sora too. I don't
Sora is
know.
never going
I
to
mean,
happen.
because I know, and I heard the other day that they're already building like a second version of it or something, and it's like at this point, no one really. I don't think anyone needs it.
Right.
So, yeah, I've used Runway and Cling, and that both of those I think
I
really.
haven't used Kling yet.
And
What do
then
you think of it?
it's awesome. It's really. I got the paid version finally because it was basically broken. Where on the free version you would you put in a prompt and it would take literally like 24 hours or longer for it to actually render the
Really?
image. Um, yeah, and it's still doing that. Yeah, it's basically like you get like 6 free a day, and then you wait a day for those, and half the time they error out. So with the paid version, it's a lot better. It just gets expensive, but
How much is it?
it's let's see. So they had a special. Basically, it's like 3,000 credits for $30, and you can do like a high resolution image for 35 credits. So is that like the math on that? I'm not sure. Is it like 80 or something for $30? It's just it's expensive. But I think Kling is the best at doing like body movements and body language and facial expressions. And also, if you do like an image to video, it's definitely the best at understanding like what's going on in the image and like where things would naturally
Cool.
go. It's yeah, Runway is a lot more janky. There's just something about the Chinese models where they really either figured out something or they're not holding back as much as the American models do.
Are you running into issues
But
with it
it's
clutching its pearls at all?
with Kling
With
or
Kling.
Runway. Really, no. The biggest problem with Cling is that if you show it something that's not a photo, like kind of like one of those like egg tempera or my Baroque painting
Yeah.
style stuff, if it thinks it's a painting, or it'll treat it like a painting, and it will just kind of like show you a static image of it, and it will just kind of zoom in on it like it's a painting.
Oh,
And they actually have that in their like user guide. They actually warn against that, where they say, if you are trying to do something like that, be sure to be like really specific about what you want it to do, like, and describe the people in the image and like what you want them to be doing. If you run it with too little detail, then it just thinks, oh, this is a painting. I'm going to show an image of somebody looking at a painting instead of animating the actual image. But yeah, so you waste a lot of credits that way. But no, it's actually really, like, I had this, not to get graphic or anything, but I have this one image where this one guy is like kind of holding out his shorts are kind of open, and the other guy's like looking at that, at his shorts. And I just put that in to Cling without any kind of extra prompting or anything. And it animated the guy putting his hand in the other guy's
Nice.
wow.
So I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's great. That's kind of what I was hoping for. But like, it just did that. It was like the third time I ever tried it. It did that. So yeah, so it's definitely not as censorious. And also, if you use like a painting, like with nudity in it, like some slight nudity in it, it'll be okay with that, and it will work with that. It's just if it's a photo, it won't. So yeah, and for what I do, it's like 99% of what I do is just trying to get around the content moderation guidelines of whatever I'm using. So yeah, you have to really find your way through that. But yeah, Cling is great. And then there's that new one, the Minimax. I forget that one's great too. That one just has more of a cinematic style usually, and you can only do one image at a time, and it takes like 5 to 10 minutes to do one, so it's super frustrating. But that one's pretty good too. That's, if you look at any of my recent stuff that looks more like photorealistic, I was using that, and I think I still have the free version, so you see the little stamp at the bottom. But yeah, the Chinese models are just really good, and they just seem more human than, and less mathematical and less algorithmic than the American ones I've tried. And again, I've never touched Stable Diffusion, so I don't have much of a comparison there.
Explored anything like video on it. I'm sure there's some kind of plug-in for it at this point. But
for Stable Diffusion,
yeah. But in terms of like content moderation, man, like I'm leaving out nudiest of these pictures I'm making. I don't want anybody to think I'm some massive perv for shooting porn at everybody all night. But like, SD just does not give a shit. I have to counter like anything. Every single thing I run has child, kid in the negative prompt. Like, just, it's like I cannot draw kids because the permutations to get to any image of a kid is going to involve something. Like SD is like this whole opposite problem. You're having to like filter what even gets you because it's so aggressively naked. Yeah.
And I think, and I don't know if that's because, I mean, it seems like in my world anyway, that's what people use because it's the only one where you can get like.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, it's,
and so it's probably.
I stopped looking at online porn. I just make my own when I want
to. Yeah. And for some reason, I just haven't connected with like the styles that I've seen in Stable Diffusion much. Although I am seeing a few now where there's.
Well, Stable Diffusion's flexible. You can put your own model in and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think my general style, like before I did any AI stuff, because I've been doing this for about a year. Before I did that, I was doing like digital art, where I would do this process where I would have an image, or just a random digital image, and then I would blow it up to a certain like artifact that I would see on the image. And then I would just keep blowing it up and putting filters on and blowing it up and doing all this weird stuff. but it was always like I wanted whatever I do, I want it to do to the entire image. So I never wanted to do any kind of in painting or change like one or two different things in the image. It was always just I just want the whole image to just be what it is.
Why?
And so with
Yeah.
why? I don't know. I think it's because I'm not an artist or not a trained artist at all. I can't draw. I can't, do any of that. And I kind of just fell into that, and then I just really wanted to see what I could do with it.
Makes sense.
So yeah,
the thing is though, is that you shouldn't. You are absolutely an artist.
You already are.
I mean,
I don't shy away from
yeah.
it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that about myself if I were you. Just because of the kind of work you do and the kind of eye it takes to do that particular kind of work. It's not something just anybody can do. And that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it compelling and fun to look at.
No, I probably need to go to bed. I got work tomorrow.
Yeah, me too.
About 4:30 every day. So
I have to get up early and have a meeting with the AI nonprofit I volunteer with.
Oh, nice.
That's every Friday.
I direct traffic and I dress up to look all hot as possible for all the, folks.
Yeah, I school moms. Yeah.
And I look great when I do it. I move so much. Because I know all these people just kind of out in my community. I work at a school around the corner from my house. So all the parents and stuff are people that I basically party with. So I'll just go out to bars and stuff. They're like, oh my gosh, I saw you Friday. Thank you for letting me in. I get to be this community hero. It's so awesome. It's just the best gig. It doesn't pay very well. I mean, I do more than that in school, but I mean, my job doesn't pay that great, but that's the fun part. It's just directing, because it's like running a stockyard or something. It's like me jumping in front of cars again to not, roll over a kid or whatever about 5 times a week. It's just fun. But I have that to look forward to early in the morning. But I do have fall break next week, so I'll be around a lot more to talk and whatever. So we should have more of this next week.
Definitely.
Yeah. I enjoyed this. I don't want to leave it, but I absolutely have to.
Oh, man, we had so much fun. And Node, I mean, dude, it would have been a very different show with you last week, I think. But I am so glad you came by and and decided to hang out with us. And I want to do this again next week if everybody's interested.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'm glad to be part of this. I really feel like I'm just talking to peers in a very rare moment that I don't get to feel that often.
I absolutely love having you in these spaces, and this is fun. This is great. You guys are, like I said, my mishpacha, and I love seeing you all.
It's like a salon.
Yeah, no, it's exactly what it is. I mean, I absolutely back you up on that. Yeah, it's perfect. It's what those were set up for, really. I'm sure people turned them into bullshit, but really a true salon is exactly what we're doing now. Most everybody blushing. The level of conversation happening right now.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like I'm a little out of it. I am more than stoned right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to put myself in bed, and that takes a little while. So I'm going to head out.
I'm with you. I'm going to do the same.
I'm going to head out too. It's great talking to you all. And thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, Lynn is really the dynamo in this. So, yeah, thank you so much, Lynn, for really putting us all together.
And Atlas, thank you for joining us this week. We had so much fun.
Yeah, it was good to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's probably
I
busy.
love the voices I'm hearing, and I love what they're saying about the subject I love and don't hear enough about. So it's just that, this is wonderful.
Okie doke.
Well, I'll be the first to hang up. I'll see y'all later. Bye.
I love you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.
And with that, We're all packing our evil robots away and putting them back in our bags of evil, where we leave you, the audience, to contemplate the destruction of human creativity and the death of art as we know it. Farewell until next time. Today's guests were Atlas Rogue, Node Chomsky, Chris H., Dee The Designer, Doll X, Tim Simpson, and always, I am your lovely and talented host, Lynn Cole. Thanks for listening. This podcast is powered by the power of immaculate indigestion. See you next time.